Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the fanfiction guy. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Becomes the Demon King? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Not all men are created equal. This was a hard truth that Izuku learned when he was just 4 years old. This is not the story of how he became the greatest hero or the greatest villain. It is the story of how he became a king, the king of his very own kingdom, Makai. One sunny day at the park, 4-year-old Izuku was playing with his friends when he noticed Bakugo had strayed off. He saw Bakugo standing over another boy on the ground, crackling with energy. "You think you're allowed on my territory? I'm going to teach you a lesson," Bakugo shouted, preparing to unleash his power. Izuku rushed forward, placing himself between Bakugo and the boy. "Stop, Kaken. This isn't right. It's not what a hero would do." Bakugo sneered. "You think at Deku like you can tell me what to do? You don't even have a quirk." Izuku shook his head. "No, Kaken. It's just that heroes don't hurt innocent people. If you keep acting like this, I'll have to stop you." Bakugo's laughter echoed as he prepared to attack. "If you want to stop me, then I'll just beat you up instead." Izuku, despite having no quirk, stood his ground. He took the punches and the explosions, feeling the weight of Bakugo's words. He felt worthless, but deep down he knew he would unlock his quirk one day and help others, unlike Bakugo, who only wanted to hurt. The anger bubbled inside him, and he couldn't stand by any longer. How dare Bakugo think he could be a hero with such an attitude? In a surge of energy, Izuku felt a transformation begin. He grew taller, standing at an imposing height, as dark energy enveloped him. A suit formed around his body, and wings sprouted from his back. His eyes turned red, and his hair darkened. He felt powerful, and with that power came a fierce determination. Bakugo looked up in fear as Izuku lifted him off the ground, his tail wrapped around Bakugo's neck. "You think strength makes you right? Just because you have a powerful quirk doesn't mean you can hurt others without consequences. I should stop a villain from attacking people, just like any hero would." With that, Izuku struck Bakugo, slamming him to the ground repeatedly. "How does it feel to be the pathetic one now? You are nothing compared to me. You hurt the innocent to feel important, just like a villain." Izuku raised Bakugo to eye level, his claws poised. He left marks on Bakugo's arms and chest, a reminder of his actions. As Bakugo cried out, Izuku felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. He didn't want to be like Bakugo, but he needed to make a point. "I can't have you dying, so let's fix that," Izuku said, blasting Bakugo with a wave of energy that healed him, though the scars and pain remained. "The pain will last for a while, and I can't have anyone knowing what happened here." With a flick of his wrist, he cast a spell over everyone in the park, making them forget the incident. "Now no one will believe you. Just grovel and feel pathetic as you suffer in silence." Izuku then knocked Bakugo out, stepping away to avoid suspicion. As the power faded, he felt himself shrinking back down to his 4-year-old self. His wings became small stumps, and his claws retracted, leaving only a small diamond shape on his hands. His eyes returned to green, though his pupils remained slit, and his hair returned to its original color. Exhausted, Izuku collapsed, knowing he had taken a step toward becoming the king he was destined to be. It seemed that the transformation had occurred because Izuku awakened his quirk in a moment of stress. This change was unlikely to happen again, as his small body had struggled to contain the energy unleashed during the event. Now that he had grown, the energy was sealing itself away, meaning he wouldn't be able to transform again until he was much older. The changes would come gradually, such as the growth of his wings and horns. An hour later, the parents of the children came to check on them, having noticed they hadn't returned. What they found horrified them. All the kids were unconscious, and the park was in disarray. Blood was splattered around Bakugo. Mitsuki rushed to her son, relieved to find no injuries on him, but the scars were alarming. She quickly picked him up and rushed him to the hospital. Izuku was also taken to the hospital, as he had not woken up at the same time as the others. His mother noticed his new appearance and felt concerned. As they traveled to the hospital, Izuku woke up and asked his mother what was happening, but she remained silent, focusing on driving. During the checkup, the doctor was impressed by Izuku's quirk, which granted him increased strength, speed, stamina, durability, and regeneration. He noted that Izuku felt something flowing through him, indicating some form of energy manipulation. The doctor also discovered that Izuku had 7 hearts after he mentioned a strange sensation in his chest. Given the new features and the demon-like qualities, the doctor decided to name it Demon Lord. "Well, midoriya," the doctor said, "I must say, young Izuku has quite an impressive quirk. He possesses superhuman abilities, and with his demon-like qualities, I theorize he could become even stronger in the dark. Although your powers are weaker now since you recently unlocked them, they will grow significantly in the future." Izuku beamed at the praise. The last doctor had told him he was quirkless, which had been discouraging. This doctor, however, was kind, though Izuku noticed his mother had a dark look in her eyes, one that disapproved of him, a look similar to the one she and his father had given him when he was diagnosed as quirkless. Inko thanked the doctor as they left, gripping Izuku's arm a little too tightly, causing him discomfort. They encountered Bakugo's mother, Mitsuki, on their way out. "Oh, hey Mitsuki, how's Katsuki doing?" Inko asked. The woman's expression fell. "Not good. He woke up recently and is screaming in pain. Whenever anyone tries to ask him what happened, he just grabs his throat and screams. I can't believe someone could do this to him." Mitsuki began to cry. They have him on as many painkillers as they can give him, but he's still hurting so much. At least he's not screaming anymore. Inko decided to visit Bakugo. When they entered the room, Bakugo's eyes widened at the sight of Izuku. Instead of fear, he felt a surge of anger. Bakugo was filled with pride, and being hurt instead of scared made him furious. He attempted to get up and leap at Izuku to punch him, shouting, "Deku!" But his body collapsed, unable to support him. Mitsuki rushed to her son's side, holding him gently. "Oh my baby, don't push yourself. I know you're happy to see your friends," she said, misinterpreting Bakugo's feelings of hatred as excitement. "I think it's best if you two leave for now. Katsuki needs some rest." Inko nodded and took Izuku home. Little did Izuku know, this would be one of the better days of his life in the coming years. When they arrived home, Izuku saw his father, Hisashi Midoriya, a man in his late 20s with brown shaggy hair and diamond-shaped freckles on his cheeks. Hisashi was smiling at Inko until he noticed Izuku's demonic appearance. His expression darkened when he saw Izuku smile, revealing sharp teeth. "Inko, what is that?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Not now, Hisashi." Later, Inko replied, clearly not wanting to discuss it. That night, Izuku struggled to sleep as his parents argued loudly. He couldn't make out all the words, but phrases like demonic bstrd and you demon birthing pierced through, making him cry. He realized they were fighting because of him, and he felt the weight of their hatred. The next day, when he ventured into the living room, he found Inko with a black eye, surrounded by empty beer bottles. She was clearly drunk. When she saw him, her glare was fierce. "You little bitty, it's all your fault," she shouted, slapping him. The impact hurt her more than him, which only fueled her rage. "I'll show you it's your fault he left. It's your fault I have this eye." She continued to lash out until he lost consciousness. When he returned to school on Monday, things didn't improve. Inko had barely fed him, leaving him hungry, and he had to walk to school alone for the first time, arriving late to class. His teacher berated him for his tardiness. On the playground, the other kids avoided him, frightened by his appearance. Those who weren't scared kept their distance, as Bakugo had spread rumors that Izuku was an evil demon. While some didn't believe him, they were swayed by what they saw. Izuku was sitting alone when a group of kids approached him, and he thought they were coming to play. When he saw Bakugo among them, he called out, "Hey Kachin, want to play?" Bakugo's response was harsh. "Like I'd ever want to play with you. You're just a demonic piece of shit." With that, his friends pinned Izuku down, and Bakugo unleashed a barrage of explosions. Izuku lay there, Too weak to fight back, his superhuman abilities diminished from exhaustion and the toll of recent events at home. Tears streamed down his face as he wondered why this was happening to him. Was it because of his quirk? It didn't seem fair that people treated him differently because of it. He felt utterly powerless, too tired and hungry to defend himself. That day marked the beginning of a relentless cycle of torment that would continue for years. At home, the beatings had started off mild, only occurring when his mother, Inko, was particularly drunk or angry. But as time passed, her drinking escalated, and she transformed the spare bedroom into a place of torment for Izuku. What began as a simple room to confine him evolved into a nightmarish space where he was tied up and left to suffer. Inko ensured that the lights were always bright, keeping him weak and unable to gather strength. Things took a turn for the worse shortly after his 8th birthday, the anniversary of when he unlocked his quirk. One night, Inko was more intoxicated than ever and decided that mere punches and kicks were insufficient. She retrieved a sharp knife from the kitchen and brought it to the room where she had restrained him. Fear filled Izuku's eyes as he struggled against his bonds, but he was too weak to escape. Inko, fueled by her rage, hurled the knife, embedding it in his shoulder. She continued to stab him, her arms growing tired but her fury unrelenting. Izuku knew he wouldn't die. His quirk ensured that as long as he had a heartbeat, he would heal from any wound, no matter how severe. Yet, he felt every stab, every cut, and the pain was unbearable. As he bled, Izuku cried out for mercy. "Please, Mommy, just stop. I promise I'll be a good boy. I won't be in your way anymore. Just please make it stop." But his pleas only fueled Inko's anger. "You little demon! You think crying will change anything? You're the reason my husband left. You're the reason my little boy is gone." With that, she continued her assault, cutting deeper and causing him to beg for forgiveness. This became the new normal for Izuku. Inko found various objects to inflict pain, each one becoming rusted and soaked in his blood over time. Through these experiences, Izuku learned vital lessons. Never cry, never talk back, never be late, and always comply with demands, no matter the cost to himself. These lessons shaped his personality and prepared him for the challenges ahead. At times, Izuku tried to evade the beatings by sneaking around, but he was always found. Even when he sought help from the police, they dismissed him, telling him to stop using his quirk in public. Local heroes turned a blind eye, leaving him to fend for himself. He took on odd jobs for those who showed him kindness, using the meager earnings to buy food and sustain himself. The relentless torment he endured transformed him, hardening his heart and shaping him into someone different, someone stronger. It was the beginning of a journey that would lead him down a dark path, one that would ultimately forge him into a figure of power. As a 10-year-old, Izuku found himself broken and bleeding on the sands of Takoba Municipal Beach, the tide receding as he lay there, contemplating his fate. Bakugo and his friends looked down at Izuku's battered form, their expressions filled with disdain. "You're so pathetic, you should just give up," Bakugo taunted, delivering a harsh kick to Izuku's stomach that sent him tumbling into the water. "Just save us all the trouble and disappear. Maybe pray for a better quirk in your next life." "Happy birthday," he sneered before stomping on Izuku's head, rendering him unconscious. With that, Bakugo and his companions walked away, leaving Izuku lying in the water as the sun began to rise. No one turned back to see Izuku's body being pulled away by the waves. He floated out to sea, and it wasn't until the full moon hung high in the sky that he began to regain consciousness. The energy of the night enveloped him, rejuvenating his body and allowing him to heal faster now that he was free from constant harm. As he closed his eyes, he savored the sensation of his injuries mending, reflecting on how he had ended up in this situation. Years of mistreatment had accustomed him to waking up in unfamiliar places, which explained his calm demeanor. The last thing he remembered was Bakugo's kick sending him into the water, and now the retreating waves had carried him away. Izuku opened his eyes, feeling the relief as his broken ribs began to realign. With the pain subsiding, he noticed a strange sensation in his neck and lungs, but he couldn't dwell on it. Rising to a sitting position, he scanned his surroundings while treading water. He realized he was far from mainland Japan, likely swept away by the currents. Given that Bakugo had started his torment early in the morning, he deduced he had been unconscious for nearly 19 hours. However, he spotted a small island in the distance and, with his body feeling significantly better after hours of rest, he began to swim toward it. By the time Izuku reached the island, the sun was rising. The journey had taken longer than he anticipated, and once he reached the shore, he distanced himself from the water before collapsing onto the sand, breathing heavily. After a few moments, he regained his composure and set out to explore the island. Hours passed as he ventured inland, eventually reaching the center where he discovered a dilapidated military base, complete with a crumbling runway. Curious, Izuku searched for any signs that could provide information about his location. He spotted various buildings with kanji on them and realized he was on a Japanese island. This knowledge eased his mind, but he still needed more information. To his surprise, he found a library within the base. After searching for a while, he located a map and confirmed he was on Iwo Jima. The island appeared to be deserted, prompting him to delve into the history section. Izuku struggled with some of the kanji, having only attended school for a few years, but he managed to glean enough to understand that the island had served as a military base from 1945 until the early 2000s. The last entry he found detailed the final days of soldiers stationed there before tensions between Japan and America led to the island's abandonment. A historian had left a record of these events, hoping that anyone who discovered the island would understand its history. After absorbing as much information as he could, Izuku decided it was time to find a secure place to rest. He felt the need for safety, especially after noticing various animal tracks around the base, including those of wolves. He was fortunate not to have encountered any wildlife yet. His quirk, which enhanced his intelligence, helped him realize that the island's animals had evolved and thrived over time, with some pets left behind by heartless owners becoming feral and adapting to their environment. Unbeknownst to him, the island was volcanic, and over the centuries, it had expanded, merging with other islands in the Bonin archipelago. As he continued his exploration, Izuku stumbled upon a sizable, unlocked house. Inside, he found a set of keys hanging on the wall, one of which fit the locks. After securing the doors, he settled in and fell into a deep sleep. When he awoke, he realized it had been one of the best nights of rest he had ever experienced. Izuku had a habit of sleeping lightly, always aware that his mother, Inko, could come and surprise him at any moment during the night. However, last night was different. He slept soundly and woke up feeling more invigorated than ever. For the first time, he sensed a small amount of energy flowing through his body. Usually, his energy was consumed by his regeneration, leaving little room for it to build up. But after just one day of rest, he felt stronger, knowing that as he grew older and accumulated more energy, his abilities would improve. He understood that the animals on the island could pose a problem, but he also needed food and water. The tinned rations had long expired, so he decided it would be best to gather energy during the day and hunt at night when his abilities would be heightened, allowing him to defend himself. Izuku settled into a meditative position in a dark room, as he found that darkness enhanced his powers. He spent the day gathering energy, and with his body fully recovered, he was able to accumulate much more. When night fell, Izuku stepped outside. His energy instinctively flowed to his eyes, causing them to glow red, illuminating the world around him. He left his base and began to explore, noticing glowing red footprints. Some were larger, likely from wolves, while others belonged to foxes and deer scattered in different areas. He decided to pursue the deer, believing he had a better chance of catching them than confronting a pack of wolves. Following the glowing footprints, he spotted a herd of deer, and his stomach growled. It had been far too long since he had eaten, and he was starving. Inko rarely fed him, and while his regeneration helped stave off the effects of malnourishment, he was still perpetually hungry. As his hunger took over, he unconsciously channeled energy into his legs and leaped forward with incredible speed, sinking his fangs into the neck of one deer. He used the body as a springboard, bright red veins coursing down his arms and converging onto the diamond scale on the back of his hands. The scale began to move and expand, forming claws that he used to slash at another deer. Driven by instinct and hunger, he quickly took down the rest of the deer that couldn't escape. After dragging the deer into a pile, he knew he could eat raw meat, having learned to survive in such a manner due to Inko's neglect. However, he preferred cooked meat. Using his claws, he cut apart some trees to make a campfire. He struck his claws against each other, creating sparks, and energy seeped from them, igniting the wood. He skinned one of the deer and cooked the meat by holding the bone over the flames. Just as he finished eating one deer, a pack of 10 wolves surrounded him, drawn by the smell of cooked meat and blood. Izuku felt a surge of panic as the wolves circled him. There were too many to fight off at once, and although he had regained some strength, he was still inexperienced in combat, relying mostly on instinct. Nice wolves, I don't mean any harm, he said, trying to calm the situation. To his surprise, the wolves seemed to understand him. The largest wolf stepped forward, towering at 4 feet tall, with a claw-like scar over its right eye. It growled, and Izuku felt an odd connection, as if he could understand its words. "Stand back, boy. This meat is ours." Izuku blinked, unsure how he understood the wolf, but he assumed it could understand him too. "Now calm down. Let's work this out. Maybe we can cooperate," he suggested. The wolf responded skeptically, "And what could a human like you do for us?" Feeling a surge of energy, Izuku let it radiate from his body, creating an oppressive aura that caused some wolves to back away. Tired of living in fear of Inko, fear of Bakugo, he decided to assert himself. "It's not what I can do for you, it's what you can do for me. I'm stronger, I'm faster. Look at these deer. Can any of you do what I did today?" His anger flared, and flames burst from his palms. "Now we can share this hunt and work together, or you can face the consequences." Izuku knew he was bluffing. He couldn't take down all the wolves, but he could handle a few. After all, confidence was key, and the best lies contained a grain of truth. The wolves hesitated, concerned by the flames and his imposing presence. The pack leader, however, was undeterred. It approached Izuku, glaring up at him. "You really think you can take me down, boy?" it growled, a freezing mist escaping its snarling mouth. Izuku met its gaze defiantly. "Oh, I can definitely take you down, you oversized puppy." He was playing on the wolf's pride, just as he had done with Bakugo, but this time he aimed to provoke it into focusing solely on him. Growling. "Oh, you think so, huh? Well, how about this? If you can beat me in a fight, my entire pack shall serve you. But if I beat you, we get to eat you and your entire hunt," Fun growled. "You're on. But before we continue, my name is Izuku. Do you have a name?" Izuku replied. "You can call me Fun," the wolf responded. Fun leapt at Izuku, claws bared, aiming for a swipe. Izuku dodged to the side, astonished to see ice forming around the slashes in the ground where Fun had attacked. "He has a quirk. This will be harder than I thought," Izuku realized. He attempted a claw swipe of his own, but it only left small scratches on the beast's incredibly thick hide. Cursing under his breath, he narrowly avoided a bite from Fun, managing to knee the wolf in the jaw. However, it didn't do much, and Fun took the opportunity to slash at Izuku. He raised his arms defensively, a veil of energy forming around them, but Fun's mighty claws shredded through it, leaving deep gashes on Izuku's arms. Thankfully, they began to regenerate quickly. He had gathered a large amount of energy before this encounter and had eaten well, so he wasn't starving. The knight was Izuku's ally, enhancing his abilities and allowing him to regenerate even as he fought Fun. He was done holding back. He would fight back and not let anyone look down on him anymore. The determination in his eyes sharpened as he snarled, baring his fangs at Fun. With a swift movement, his tail wrapped around Fun's neck, using it to pivot onto the wolf's back while keeping his grip. Fun snarled and bucked, trying to throw Izuku off, even slamming into trees, but it was ineffective. However, Izuku could feel the ice spreading over his body from Fun's back. Knowing this was his best chance to defeat the giant wolf, he continued to slash, energy coating his claws to dig deeper and inflict serious wounds. But the cold was taking its toll, slowing him down, and Fun slammed him into another tree. Anger surged within Izuku, fueling his energy and causing it to burst forth in great quantities. He let out a primal scream, and with it his energy transformed into flames, countering the freezing cold Fun had unleashed. Gaya hara har. Fun howled in pain as Izuku felt words enter his mind and spoke them aloud. Gleipnir. The flames twisted into chains that wrapped around Fun, tightening their grip as Izuku's tail glowed red with heat. With Fun immobilized and bleeding, he fell to the ground. Fun struggled against the chains, but it was futile. Izuku slashed Fun's face, leaving marks over his left eye. He prepared to deliver the finishing blow but hesitated. Submit, Fun. You've lost. Fun closed his eyes and stopped struggling. Just kill me. You were a worthy opponent. I'd rather die at your hands than bleed out. Izuku shook his head. No, I won't allow you to die, Fun. He felt the last remnants of his energy flow into his fingers as his claws faded back into the diamonds on his hands. He pressed the pointed nails of his right hand into Fun's neck, hoping to transfer his energy. In his youthful innocence, he believed it would work. Miraculously, a light enveloped Fun, and he began to grow, reaching 10 feet tall. When the light faded, his eyes had transformed from dark green to a clear crystal blue, and his claws were now longer and sharper, appearing to be made of dark ice. His tail had also changed, becoming longer with shards of ice covering the last few inches, the spikes at the tip exceptionally sharp. As Fun stood up, both he and Izuku looked at each other in confusion, not understanding what had just happened. Izuku glanced down at his hand, surprised by the outcome. Fun then bowed to Izuku, acknowledging his strength and tenacity, and the rest of the wolves followed suit. Lord Izuku, my clan and I are yours to command, Fun declared. Izuku smiled at the wolf, placing a hand on Fun's head. I'm happy to have you. With his new form, Fenrir was bestowed a name that resonated with power. Now everyone let's eat, Izuku declared, and the wolves joined him in feasting on the remaining deer. After their meal, they returned to the wolves' den, content and ready for a good night's sleep. Izuku sighed happily, feeling Fenrir curled around him, enveloping him in warmth. This new life was a welcome escape from his past. Away from Inko, away from Bakugo, away from the pain he had endured in Japan. It would take time to heal from his trauma, but this was the beginning. He had finally found a home. This island was now his sanctuary, and he was determined to make it the paradise he had always dreamed of, a place he would call Makai. When Izuku woke up, he noticed two things. He was wrapped in an incredibly fluffy tail, and despite just waking up, he felt utterly exhausted. He tried to focus on regenerating his energy but realized it was being drawn to Fenrir. He recalled the events of the previous night and understood, ever since he had named Fenrir, there had been a drain on his energy. He gently shook the wolf awake. Hey, wake up, he said. Fenrir jolted awake, feeling more energized than ever. However, concern crossed his face as he noticed the bags under Izuku's eyes. My lord, are you okay? It's okay, I'm fine. It was the best sleep I've ever had. I've never slept on a full stomach before. It's just that all my energy is going to you, Fenrir. As he spoke, the drain on his energy ceased, and the energy that had been sent to Fenrir began to return to Izuku. To his amazement, Fenrir started to glow, his form twisting and changing into a more humanoid shape. When the light faded, Fenrir stood 7 feet tall, with long silver hair cascading down his back, silver wolf ears perched atop his head, and a large silver wolf tail with black tips. He had sharp facial features and ice-blue eyes wide with wonder at his new form, dressed in a sleek black suit and a white shirt. And sir, this is amazing. I feel so much more powerful, Fenrir exclaimed, attempting to take a step forward but stumbling and falling flat on his face, still adjusting to his new limbs. Izuku realized he could make his forces incredibly powerful. By naming them, he could give them energy until they absorbed it and transformed into stronger forms. Although they would need time to adapt, this would greatly aid him in taking over the vast island. If he wanted to achieve his goals, he would also need to teach them how to speak, read, and write Japanese. He hoped that transforming them into what he now called demons would enhance their ability to learn languages, just as he had experienced. He helped Fenrir to his feet. Looks like you have a lot to learn about being in a human form. Fenrir nodded and created a staff of ice to help him stand as they made their way to the library of the military base. Though he stumbled often, with Izuku's assistance, they reached their destination and sat at a table. Can you tell me more about the history, animals, territories, and abilities on this island? Izuku asked. Of course, Fenrir replied. Many years ago, after the humans left, all were without powers. But over time, different species began to develop superpowers and took over territories, often disregarding the weaker species. For example, the deer we hunted yesterday are entirely different from the super deer, who are much stronger. Those without powers have been hunted and bred for food, so we don't have to deal with the powers of others. My pack was once among the hunted until I was born with ice powers, which allowed us to defend ourselves and carve out our own territory. Izuku nodded, sympathetic to Fenrir's past. I'm sorry to hear that. Fenrir shook his head. The weak die and the strong survive. We all do what we can to live. Izuku understood that he was speaking to a being with a different perspective. Fenrir's powers were intriguing. He realized he could understand Fenrir's grunts and growls perfectly. It seemed that the energy flowing to his throat and ears allowed for this communication, a thought to ponder later. So, who are the main powers in control? Izuku inquired. Within our area, there are 3 main powers: the wolves, the foxes, and the deer. Their strength is ranked in that order. Each pack possesses powers that grant them demps over normal packs like ours. The deer have the smallest territory because the others oppress them, despite their greater numbers, which allows them to maintain some land. However, it's expected that if you leave your territory, you'll be killed by someone else. In the neutral zone where weaker non-super animals lived, the balance of power was evident. The non-powered outnumbered those with abilities, often due to infighting among factions. This allowed many species to reproduce in hopes of one day birthing a powered individual who could protect them. Despite the few cases of powered beings born from non-powered parents, the threat of being hunted loomed large. However, there was an unspoken agreement among the factions not to attack one another. The protagonist, barely managing to keep his pack alive, noted that they now hunted other wolf packs and animals instead of targeting him. Even the weakest among them could easily overpower those without abilities. This demps kept the powerless subdued, waiting to be hunted. Rumors from birds suggested that the rabbits in the north suffered the most. Izuku grimly acknowledged the situation. It mirrored the struggles in Japan, where the weak were often crushed by the strong. He realized that humans were not much different from animals in this regard. Leading his pack of wolves, he hunted the powerless, and he envisioned a future where he would establish farms for carnivores. His concerns stemmed from the powerful suppressing the powerless, but he accepted that predators hunting prey was simply nature, and he intended to control it. As they discussed the factions on the island, Fenrir mentioned that while there were 3 powers in Iwo Jima, the southern part of the island was similarly divided. He explained that the northern birds formed a powerful coalition, known for their political maneuvering, while the reptile tribe, led by snakes, held a wide variety of powers. The rabbits, despite their large numbers, fell just short of the snakes in terms of power. In the east, the bats had developed a society resembling that of humans, likely influenced by their ancestors' interactions with humans. They had unique abilities and a shared literacy that set them apart. Fenrir continued, describing the livestock alliance of horses and cows that banded together for protection, followed by the intelligent insects that had gained powers. The West, however, was the most dangerous region, dominated by lions known for their strength and speed. They maintained their territory atop the mountains, having evolved from overwhelming beasts that had split from the reptiles long ago. Izuku listened intently, realizing the enormity of the challenge ahead. He had expected more creatures, but Fenrir clarified that many were smaller and weaker, unable to stand against the might of the larger packs. The mention of monsters lurking in the ocean depths added to the gravity of their situation. When Fenrir inquired about Izuku's plans with this information, Izuku revealed his ambition to take control of the island, uniting all species under his command, and seeking revenge on those who had wronged him in Japan. Fenrir expressed concern about their current strength, but Izuku smirked, suggesting they needed to build an army. He explained that he could boost others' powers by naming them or sharing his blood. If Fenrir could empower the other wolves, they could rally other creatures to their cause and lead them against the factions. With determination, Izuku began searching the library for something that could aid their mission. After a thorough search, he discovered a scroll that exceeded his expectations. Spreading it out on the table, he revealed a map of not just Iwo Jima but all the connected islands. In the corner, he noticed initials that read, Ignis. These initials sparked a memory, and he quickly retrieved a history book he had skimmed through the day before. Confusion washed over him as he pondered how a writer from so long ago could possess a map of the current state of the Bonin Islands. The unpredictability of volcanic activity made it improbable that anyone without powers could accurately predict the island's shape and size. Something was amiss, and he was determined to uncover the truth. Izuku shook his head, deciding to figure things out later. He needed to look for more books and scrolls by I.MS, but now it was time to discuss strategy with Fenrir. After a couple of hours of conversation, they outlined their plan: who to recruit first, how to build an army to take on the entire island, and the need for a name. Given that Izuku had been ostracized and called a demon, he envisioned creating a demonic army composed of creatures empowered by his own abilities. Their first priority was to enhance Fenrir's pack. Since Izuku had given Fenrir his blood, he was curious to see how it would affect others of his kind. Once they were empowered, he would give them new names to signify their transformation and increase their strength. Training would follow, allowing the wolves to adapt to their new powers. They planned to recruit other animals, starting with deer and foxes, and then moving on to wolves. This approach would help them grow stronger as they faced more powerful creatures. However, they faced a challenge. The wolves were carnivores and needed to hunt some of those they aimed to recruit. Izuku had a few candidates in mind but would need to explore that later, as he had only begun to understand the extent of his powers. After their strategy meeting, Izuku and Fenrir walked back to their base. Fenrir had improved significantly, managing to walk without his staff, though he still stumbled occasionally. As they approached the cave, they were greeted by the rest of the wolves. Izuku quickly set his plan into motion, instructing Fenrir to create a large bowl of ice. Fenrir complied instantly, a look of satisfaction on his face. "My lord, your powers are truly remarkable. I could never create such large items so quickly before this new energy you have given me," he said. Izuku was taken aback. He had thought he had merely enhanced Fenrir's strength, but it was clear that it was much more profound. If Fenrir could harness this energy, it meant that sharing his blood with the other wolves would likely work as well. It also explained the connection he felt with Fenrir. It wasn't just a creator feeling its creation, but rather a shared energy. Fenrir demonstrated his newfound abilities by creating a small ice dagger, nodding as he spoke. "It seems you've used these powers instinctively without fully understanding how they work. By focusing on my instincts, I can grasp the process. This energy freezes and solidifies," he explained, showcasing a crystal blue energy that emanated from him, distinct from Izuku's red. The energy cooled the surrounding area, forming hexagonal prisms that came together to create a chain. Izuku nodded, grateful for the explanation. "Thank you. I'll have to see if I can replicate that later. Please continue." Fenrir filled the bowl with ice, and Izuku addressed the pack. "Listen up. You all witnessed the changes Fenrir underwent, becoming immensely stronger. You will all drink his blood, which should grant you powers. I don't know what abilities you will receive, but you will be significantly stronger. I will also give you new names to provide you with a human form that will offer advantages in battle." The wolves eagerly drank the blood, familiar with the taste from their hunts. Initially, nothing seemed to happen, causing Izuku to worry, but then they were enveloped in a golden glow, growing in size and developing new features. One wolf even sprouted a horn in the center of its head. This was a better outcome than Izuku had anticipated. He could feel the surge of power radiating from them, along with a faint connection to each wolf. It wasn't as strong as the bond he shared with Fenrir, likely because he hadn't directly created these wolf demons. He noticed the shock on Fenrir's face as he sensed the connection to the 6 wolves. It was time to name them. Izuku approached the wolf with the horn first, moving along the line as he named them: Ranga, Shiro, Kuro, Doro, Joan, and finally Bio. After bestowing the names, Izuku collapsed, drained of energy from the effort. He didn't awaken for 3 days, the exhaustion from naming 6 wolves having taken its toll. When he finally stirred, he felt well rested, though hunger gnawed at him. It seemed his body had learned from the previous experience, waiting until his energy was fully restored. He noticed that his reserves felt larger than ever, possibly due to his growth or the cycle of drain and recovery he had undergone. Looking around, he didn't see any wolves, so he stepped outside the cave. It was midday, and he assumed they were out hunting. Deciding to join them to expedite the process, he spread out his senses but suddenly felt an alarming presence nearby. His connection with Fenrir allowed him to sense the wolf's life force diminishing and a wave of fear that was unusual for such a powerful creature. Even when facing death in their first battle, Fenrir had shown no fear. This change worried Izuku, prompting him to channel energy into his legs and race off to save his pack. Upon arrival, the first thing that hit Izuku was the overwhelming smell of blood. He scanned the area and saw his pack, 7 in human form and 3 in wolf form, each suffering from various injuries. Some were bleeding on the ground, while the 3 wolves had deep gashes across their bodies, purple blood pooling around them. Despite appearing relatively uninjured, Fenrir knelt, breathing heavily, his color a sickly shade of purple. He gripped his ice sword with determination, protecting the others even as his strength waned. Opposite them stood a wolf pack 3 times their size, many of whom were injured or dead, with frozen remnants of wolves scattered around. The 3 leaders in front, however, bore only minor bruises, indicating their strength. They were bipedal and looked distinctly different from the wolves in Izuku's pack. He recognized them as a gray wolf, a maned wolf, and a coyote, each in different colors, blue, red, and yellow. The blue one towered over the others at 10 feet tall, clearly the leader. Izuku growled, demanding to know who they were and what they wanted. The blue wolf responded, accusing Izuku of being responsible for their actions, claiming they could have left his pack alone if not for the emergence of new power. Izuku offered them a chance to surrender, or else he would destroy them. The trio laughed, dismissing his threat, claiming they had already defeated his entire pack. With his eyes darkening, Izuku unleashed a wave of energy from his body, declaring himself stronger than all of them. His eyes glowed as his demonic features became more pronounced. His horns grew, his wings expanded, and energy formed gloves around his hands. The wolves laughed at his transformation, mocking him for his size and appearance. Izuku lunged at them, claws extended, but was met with a kick from the red wolf. He snarled, introducing himself as Izuku, asserting his superiority and the might of the Morning Star Pack. Coating his hands and feet in energy that transformed into fire, he launched himself at the red wolf, dodging another kick and countering with a punch that burned the wolf's foot. As he fought, Izuku noticed the 3 wolves who were dying. Their purple blood made him realize the truth. He was dealing with poison, which had weakened Fenrir. Time was running out, and he needed to act quickly. Red veins spread across his body as the energy within him surged angrily. He focused on the yellow wolf, Lavender, but had to dodge another attack from Basil. Now facing 2 opponents, Izuku felt energized and ready for battle. When Basil attacked, Izuku wrapped his tail around the wolf's foot, swinging him around before throwing him into a tree and unleashing a blast of fire at Lavender, singeing his fur. Frustrated that his fire wasn't hot enough, he concentrated, increasing the flame's temperature before unleashing a torrent of blue fire against Lavender's poison. The 2 forces clashed, but Izuku had to dodge another kick from Basil, disrupting the struggle. A barrage of energy blasts and poison came his way, and he deflected them with his claws, determined to avoid any contact with his skin. The earlier poison was affecting him, slowing him down, but he felt a shift within himself. Glancing at Fenrir, an idea sparked. He held his hands out as if pouring energy, and chains made of fire began to wrap around his wrists and forearms, sharpening into blades. With a single word, chaos, he spun the fiery chains and charged at Lavender, sending one blade toward him while using Basil as a shield against another incoming attack. Izuku smirked, dodging a poison blast while dragging the red wolf with him, wrapping a second chain around Basil's neck. Channeling energy into the fire, he felt his strength growing as the flames turned purple. Basil let out a pained cry as he slumped against Izuku, going limp. The blue wolf, Bergamo, seeing his brother in danger, charged in to help, no longer staying on the sidelines. However, Izuku used Basil as a WHP to bat him aside. Although it knocked Bergamo back, it didn't do any damage and the wolf grew slightly bigger. Izuku realized that Bergamo's quirk allowed him to turn damage into power, increasing his size. Izuku began swinging Basil around faster and faster by the chain around his leg until he became a red blur. Basil was then launched at Lavender, but there was one slight problem. Izuku never let go of the chain. A pained scream echoed through the clearing as Basil clutched at his now missing legs, coughing up purple blood while his brothers held him in place, snarling at Izuku. Izuku responded with a fanged grin as he tossed the legs back to their owner. "Here, you can have them back." Lavender attempted to rise and help his brother, his hands coated in a green aura, but he stumbled back down, clutching his ribs. The impact must have done serious damage. Seizing the opportunity, Izuku knocked Lavender out with a purple energy blast to the wolf's face, ensuring he couldn't heal Basil. Seeing his brothers incapacitated, Bergamo charged at Izuku, the ground shaking as the behemoth thundered toward his prey. Izuku's smirk widened as he ran to meet Bergamo. He rolled to the side to dodge a giant fist aimed at him and slashed at the wolf's arm, but the cut was shallow. The skin was much tougher than he had anticipated. Still, it made him grow a couple of inches. Izuku scowled, realizing he needed a new strategy. Deciding to escalate the fight, he launched himself into the air and began circling the giant wolf man. He charged for Bergamo's mouth, which opened wide, aiming to swallow Izuku whole. Instead, Izuku held the mouth open and blasted purple fire directly into the wolf's stomach. Bergamo recoiled in pain, growing to a titanic 20 feet tall. Shortly after, his cheeks gained a purple hue, causing him to grow even larger. Izuku's eyes widened in realization. His fire had somehow gained a poisonous attribute. The poison was continuously damaging Bergamo, making him stronger. A week passed before Izuku woke up again, but he could barely focus on anything other than his hunger. He had gone 10 days without food, and while his regeneration could stave off the effects of starvation, it didn't lessen the pain. As he looked around for something to eat, something blue caught his eye. Many deer encased in ice. Fire spilled from his mouth, encasing his jaws as he charged at the ice, melting it and cooking the deer. He tore into them mercilessly, blood and bone flying everywhere, ensuring not a single shred of meat escaped his grasp. Fenrir watched with a smile, pleased that his lord was finally awake and had fully embraced his new nature. He had gathered and frozen deer during their hunts, saving one for Izuku so he could eat right away without having to consume decaying flesh. Once the deer were consumed, Fenrir spoke. "Are you satisfied, my lord?" Izuku nodded. "Yes, thank you. I really needed that. How has everyone been?" "Good, my lord. When we're not hunting, we're training, getting used to our new powers and growing stronger." Izuku nodded, realizing he needed to train as well. He hadn't even scratched the surface of what his powers could do. They had made general plans before, but now they needed to strategize their next steps. With that, Izuku and Fenrir returned to the library to work on their immediate plans. Izuku rolled out a map of the island, marked with the territory lines that Fenrir knew. "It's best we start with the deer. They have the smallest territory, so it will be the easiest to conquer. After we bring them to our side, we can move on to the foxes. With those numbers, we should be able to take on the wolves." Fenrir nodded in agreement. "I don't have exact numbers, but I know they have the most out of the 3 factions. They're also attacked the most. The territory they hold now is all they can manage as they're more concentrated, but their numbers are easily over 300. Perhaps there is some information we can gather. Which means we'll have to build up our forces. While the pack has grown stronger, they can only take on groups 3 times their size. We can't rely solely on my strength." Fenrir agreed. "If we want your pack to reign supreme, our weakest link must be stronger than the enemy's strongest. You and I will start by recruiting whatever species we can find in the neutral zone. Even if deer and foxes are prominent in the south, that doesn't mean there aren't other animals. Izuku then got up from the table to scan the collection of books until he found what he was looking for, a book written by I.M.S. The book was titled Species in I, but the final word was scratched out and seemed to be covered in a strange energy. No matter how much energy he directed at it, the blockage remained. Izuku furrowed his brow in confusion but decided to set the book aside for now. The first page displayed an index indicating north, south, east, and west. However, as he flipped through the pages, he noticed that many sections were blurred, with only a few species listed in the southern section: hedgehogs, tanuki, and monkeys. Izuku smiled at the discovery. It wasn't much, but he could definitely work with it. Fenrir, I want you to focus on recruiting the foxes and deer since you're more familiar with them. I'll handle the other 3, he instructed. The wolf man nodded in agreement. Yes, my liege. Upon returning to their base, Izuku was unexpectedly tackled to the ground by a massive wolf, which was then joined by 2 others that liked him affectionately. He laughed as he pushed the large creature away and stood up, recognizing the 3 heads as the wolves he had saved and named. He also noticed a snake wagging behind them instead of a typical wolf tail. What happened to you? Izuku asked, intrigued. The middle head bobbed as it spoke. After you gave us your blood and named us, our bodies fused together, and the tail transformed into a snake. The 3 heads puffed out their chests with pride. And that is how we became the mighty Cerberus. Izuku rubbed their heads affectionately. Good boys, he praised, and the snake wagged happily in response. Now, shall we train? The rest of the day was spent training with the wolves, learning to harness their new forms and powers. During this time, Izuku experimented with his own abilities. He noticed something unusual about his energy. Whenever he used an attack, it had a purple tint and even caused some trees to decay. Meditating, he discovered that his energy felt toxic, likely a result of absorbing Basil's poison. He quickly learned to contain it, converting it back to its regular state. The idea that his energy could change and combine attributes intrigued him, as he had just created a poisonous flame. The second concern was a connection he felt to another energy source, one that felt similar to his own. Following the energy line, he found it leading into the forest, reminiscent of the bond he shared with Fenrir. This warranted further investigation, but he decided to focus on training for the rest of the day and would explore it further the next morning. After hunting for food, Izuku and Fenrir set out to recruit animals to their side. Although hunting might not endear them to others, they needed to eat. This reminded Izuku of a time when he had seen his mother, Inko, watching a nature documentary while crying. She had been upset about a zebra being hunted, knowing the lion's cubs would starve without a meal. Unsure of where to find the animals, Izuku followed the energy tether he had sensed. It was strange that he hadn't felt it before, but he assumed it was because his energy capacity had recently increased. Following the energy line, he arrived at a cave. The entrance was completely dark, but he could see the line leading inside, so he ventured in. As he walked deeper, his senses dulled until he could no longer see, hear, or smell anything. He could barely feel anything, but his sense of touch remained. Channeling energy into his eyes and ears, he regained some hearing, but his sight remained limited to blurry shapes until he noticed a golden glow ahead. As he approached, he could make out the figure of a man, the golden glow appearing as characters wrapping around him like chains. The man looked up, his golden red slitted eyes widening in recognition as they met Izuku's vibrant crimson eyes. Izuku, is that you? Izuku stepped back, unsure how to respond. He was certain he had never met this man before. Before he could answer, the man continued, No, those eyes. They're different, similar but different. Confused, Izuku listened as the man rambled on. Ah, that's right, it must be around that time. I should have known, the resonance happened recently after all. Sorry for rambling. It's nice to meet you, Izuku Morningstar. The mention of his new last name snapped Izuku out of his stupor, confirming that he couldn't have known this man in Japan. Yes, I am. Who are you, and how do you know me? The man grinned cheekily. My name is Ogong, and as for how I know you, I'm afraid that's a secret. Izuku narrowed his eyes in suspicion but decided to let it go, sensing that he wouldn't be able to extract any more information from Ogong about his knowledge. It must be frustrating to have such blurry vision. Touch the kanji wrapping around me, it will restore your sight, the man said. I'm fine with my sight as it is, Izuku replied, which only made the man laugh heartily. A tear fell from his eye, and he went to wipe it, only to remember that his limbs were bound by kanji chains, preventing him from moving even an inch. The laughter soon faded. You really are exactly like he said you'd be. I'm curious if everything he said was true or if he was exaggerating. Who are you speaking of? Izuku asked, scowling. You know him very well, but for now, let's just call him my benefactor. Izuku let it go for the moment. Fine then, tell me who you really are, or who you were before you got locked here. The man smirked. Straight to the point. I'm surprised you don't know already. I thought you would have figured it out by now, but I guess it's not as good as it will be yet, so I'll tell you. Izuku felt his annoyance growing as the man continued with his cryptic words. As you know, I am Ogong, but what you don't know is that I am the Monkey King. Izuku's eyes widened in surprise. I was once the leader of a powerful monkey faction. However, fearing our potential and my power, the monsters allied with other races to kill and enslave my kind. Since they were unable to end me, they decided to seal me here among the weakest races, believing they wouldn't have the strength to break me out. How long have you been in here? Izuku asked, still processing this revelation. It's hard to say. Time flows differently within this cave. From what my benefactor tells me, it's been about 100 years in outside time, but for me, it's been about 500 years. Izuku was shocked at the thought of how long Ogong had been trapped. How are you still alive? It's my power. Unlike the monsters, monkeys don't have an extraordinarily long lifespan. Instead, I awakened a power that allows me to heal from anything and live forever. This is what has allowed me to endure in this cave for so long. In my younger years, I pondered if death would be better, but I soon realized that being alive is always better than being dead. How strong were you with this power? In my day, I was called Heaven's Equal. This was after I defeated the heavenly monster Jade. After that, my species and I became feared for our strength. I alone could barely hold off the monsters, but then the other species joined in, and it was after that I was taken to this cave. Are they the ones who cursed this cave? Yes. It was originally just a deep cave, but they decided that merely sealing me in here was not enough to compensate for the damage I had done to their pride. They used their combined powers to take away the senses of all who enter, with it getting worse the deeper you go. How is it that we're talking then if your senses were taken away? That's where my benefactor comes in. He came here 105 years ago, altered my seal, and allowed me to experience my senses once again. Ever since then, he's visited a couple of times a year, giving me information about the outside world. And he told you about me? You could say that. Izuku decided it was time to get to the point. If I free you, will you serve under me? If you free me and help save those of my kind that still remain, I will serve you to the best of my ability, my liege. Izuku smiled, realizing it would be worth it to gain such a powerful ally. I can agree to that. He placed his hand on the seal, sensing that Ogong meant no harm. As he did, Ogong regained his senses and could see his new ally clearly. Ogong was a well-built man with platinum white hair that flowed down to his waist. His golden eyes sparkled with mischief. So this is what I look like, he said with a grin. Don't start falling for me now, Ogong teased. Izuku scowled and playfully punched him in the stomach. If Ogong hadn't been chained up, he might have doubled over. Shut up. Izuku focused on making his energy as corrosive as possible, adding his new poison energy to it. Since Ogong was immortal, he didn't have to worry about harming him. He directed his energy onto the kanji chains binding Ogong. After a few minutes, the golden chains transformed into a dark purple, and the areas touching Ogong's skin also turned purple. He gritted his teeth in pain but remained silent. Izuku furrowed his brow in concentration, focusing on destroying the seal. It was stronger than he expected, but he soon found the alterations made to it. Nearby, He noticed cracks and exploited those to destroy the rest of the seal, allowing Ogong to fall. Izuku caught him just in time. "Ah, darkness, my old friend, welcome back," Ogong said, but Izuku realized that without the seal, Ogong had lost all his senses again. After 10 minutes of walking, they finally made it outside. Ogong had to shield his eyes as sunlight hit him for the first time in 500 years, along with all the other sights, smells, sounds, and even tastes of the outside world. As Izuku set him back on his feet, Ogong stumbled, not used to walking after so long. He lost his balance and fell into Izuku, who caught him again. Izuku looked up at the sky. "You really weren't kidding about the time difference. Barely any time has passed since I first entered the cave. I still have other species to recruit to my cause before heading back to base." The Monkey King nodded, following alongside Izuku as he slowly adjusted to the outside world once more. Izuku pulled out the species book he had brought with him and was surprised to find that the section on monkeys contained more information than he expected, including details about Ogong. Curious about any potential connections, he decided to investigate further later. He flipped to the pages about tanukis, noting that they could be found just east of the military base, near a small pond. Taking the direct route past his cave, Izuku noticed it was empty. His pack members were likely out training or hunting. This allowed him to pass through quickly without stopping to greet them. Soon, he arrived at the pond, only to find a pack of tanukis standing their ground against a group of three-tailed foxes, led by a formidable four-tailed fox. Just as Izuku was about to intervene, the confrontation escalated into a fight. Some of the tanukis began to shift, growing larger or changing their forms. Among them, a golden tanuki transformed into a giant made of sand, which astonished Izuku. He had thought that most creatures in the neutral zone would remain unaffected, but it seemed the foxes were hunting them for their newfound strength, similar to how some wolves targeted his own pack. The skirmish began with the smaller foxes attacking the mutated tanukis. The smaller tanukis struggled against the fire attacks, unable to get close. Just as a fatal blow was about to land, sand enveloped one of the tanukis, forming a protective shield. It retaliated against the foxes, but the shield was quickly turned to glass by the flames. The larger tanukis faced similar challenges. Despite their size, they were at a disadvantage against the fire. The sand shields provided some protection, but the leading sand tanuki was distracted, unable to focus on both attack and defense, which left it vulnerable to an attack from the fire avatar that knocked it back. Seeing the chaos unfold, Izuku decided it was time to intervene. "I think it's time for you to shake off your rust, don't you think, Ogong?" he said with a smirk, extending his arm as glowing kanji appeared. A staff materialized in his hand. "This is my Ruibang 2.0, you'll be hard-pressed to find a better weapon." Ogong dashed forward, swinging his staff with precision. He struck the smaller foxes, sending them crashing into trees, then performed a backflip, using the extended staff to knock one of the giant foxes hard enough to send it flying, landing unconscious. As he landed, he prepared to attack again but was met with a powerful strike from the fire avatar. Instead of being defeated, he found himself engulfed in flames. Though it caused his skin to burn and peel, he laughed maniacally. "Yes, more. This rush, it's just like it used to be. Bring me more." With renewed energy, he leaped through the fire and punched the fox, sending it out of the flames. However, the fox quickly formed another fire avatar, even hotter than before, glaring at him as it launched another attack. Ogong allowed himself to be hit, using the momentum to bounce off a tree and gain height. He grew his Ruibang again, striking the fox in the face before spinning and slamming its head into the ground. Izuku allowed himself to merge with the fox's essence, feeling an intense heat coursing through him. As he walked through the smoke that began to cloud his vision, he still maintained clarity. He seized the four-tailed fox by the neck and shouted, "Hey boss, do you want them dead or alive?" Izuku chuckled as he noticed the shift in Ogong's demeanor during the battle. "Kill that one, leave the others." Ogong nodded, swiftly snapping the fox's neck before tossing it to Izuku, who caught it and aimed before throwing it toward the camp, sensing Fenrir nearby and communicating through their link. Approaching the tanuki, Izuku focused his energy, altering his vocal cords so they could understand him. He thought about how he was speaking Japanese to Ogong and wondered how the monkey could comprehend him. Shaking his head, he decided to save those questions for later. Hello, Tanukis. I am Izuku Morningstar. Can I have your names? Most of the Tanukis were too shocked or frightened to approach him, but the leader, a small sandy Tanuki, strutted forward. I am Shika, the almighty god emperor of the Tanukis. Bow before me. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Well, Kaku, you didn't seem very godly against that fox. My subordinate was the one who took it down. Kaku flinched as he glanced at the bloody and smoking Ogong. While I thank your friend for his assistance, I had to ensure I defended my subjects. If I could focus, those foxes would be nothing but a smear on the ground like all those before them. As he spoke, the remaining foxes were engulfed by sand, crushed into a paste, and the bloody sand returned to Kaku, though he did not grow in size. Impressive. Now, Kaku, I want you to join me. Join my pack. I will take over this island, and all will come under my control. Help me crush my enemies and show that the Tanukis aren't to be trifled with. Kaku scrutinized Izuku. You don't look all that strong to me. You're just a puny human. Izuku scowled and lifted the Tanuki by the scruff of his neck, his eyes glowing a fierce red as he growled, You pathetic little creature. You couldn't protect your own, and you think you have the right to question my power when I could crush you with a snap of my fingers. He raised his hands, channeling his energy, and shouted, Taimatsu! An inferno of blue flames erupted, sapping the moisture from the air and incinerating nearby trees. The Tanukis were knocked to the ground, sweating profusely as the moisture evaporated, causing some to faint as glass began to form around Shikaku. Finally, the fire subsided. Kaku stared at Izuku in awe. If I join you, would it be possible to gain that power? You may not gain the power of fire, but your strength will increase dramatically. As the other Tanukis regained consciousness, they saw their leader, Kaku, bowing before Izuku. I, Kaku the Almighty, bow to you, my lord. The Tanukis and I are yours to command. Izuku nodded. I'm glad you could see things my way. How many Tanukis serve under you? 30 in total, although only 9 possess power. That's fine. I shall grant them all power. Gather them and take them to the wolf cave by the city. Do you know where that is? The Tanuki nodded. Yes, that is the territory of Fun. He counters my sand, so I make sure to avoid him at all costs. Well, he's my right hand. He'll ensure you are accommodated before I return. The Tanuki nodded and hurried off to gather his kin. Alright, Kigong, one more stop before we head back to base. The monkey nodded and followed Izuku, who flipped to the hedgehog page in his book, noting it was north of the city along the border with the deer. Upon arrival, Izuku saw a group of deer, some seemingly made of shadows, trampling through the bushes and logs, attacking something. He noticed small creatures scurrying around, trying to escape. This situation was different from Kaku and Fenrir's. These powerless beings were in real danger. Just as a deer was about to crush a hoglet beneath its hooves, it was met with a staff to the face. When Ogong attempted to smash another deer, his attack passed right through it, as its shadowy head dissipated into smoke. Despite his efforts, the deer turned their attention to him, ceasing their assault on the hedgehogs. As the shadows came alive and charged at him, they successfully speared him. However, he ran along the spikes, widening the holes in his chest until he got close enough to smash one of the heads. Suddenly, he found himself unable to move. A shadow extended from the largest black-furred deer, which bore 2 scars on the left side of its face, connecting to Ogong's own shadow and freezing him in place. Shadowy hands emerged from both his shadow and the shadows that had impaled him, constricting around his body and tightening around his neck. The deer were taken aback when the man responded with a fierce grin. Izuku's expression shifted from anger to determination as he faced the shadow deer. With a fierce charge, he unleashed a powerful punch, obliterating one of the creatures. He then leaped into the air, delivering a fiery bicycle kick to the leader, igniting it in flames and sending it staggering back. With his flaming claws, he swiftly dismantled the remaining deer, leaving a chaotic scene behind. The leader, now retreating, was shrouded in shadows, its eyes the only visible feature before it vanished completely. Looking down at the remnants of his fallen comrade, Izuku felt a pang of sadness. I would have liked to know you more, Ogong. I'm sure we could have been good friends. But don't worry, I'll avenge you. To his astonishment, the pile of remains began to tremble and rise. Slowly, a human form emerged, and soon Ogong stood before him, restored. A familiar red energy enveloped him, and new clothes appeared. Izuku rushed forward, enveloping Ogong in a relieved embrace. I'm glad you're okay. I thought you died. With a cheeky grin, Ogong replied, You forgot I was immortal, didn't you? I wasn't sure how immortal you were. I thought being turned into a pile was too much even for you. Stepping back, Ogong patted Izuku's shoulder. Shishishi, nothing can kill me, no matter what happens. Izuku finally calmed down and noticed the hedgehogs gazing up at him in awe. After a moment of squeaking, one of them spoke, Wow, that was amazing. You two are so strong. You dealt with those deer like it was nothing. Izuku smiled warmly at the little creatures. Which one of you is the leader? The hedgehog with the largest spikes stepped forward, placing itself on Izuku's outstretched hand. I am Nikki, nice to meet you, O mighty one. Izuku responded, Would you and your kind like to join me in my campaign against the powers of this island, to bring it under my banner? I would like to, mighty one, but we are powerless. We would be of little help. That's where you're wrong. I have the ability to grant incredible power to others. If you join me, you and your subordinates will be gifted with the strength to take down those who would oppress you, like those deer. Nikki beamed at him and bowed. My people are yours to command, my liege. Turning to the others, he shouted, Prickle people. The mighty one seeks our assistance in his campaign against the oppressors. He shall grant us amazing power to finally show that we hedgehogs are to be feared, not tossed aside. We shall rise and destroy our enemies in the name of our new lord. The hedgehogs erupted in cheers, their excitement echoing around them. Ogong found the scene amusing, as it sounded like a chorus of squeaks to him. With that, Izuku and Ogong led the enthusiastic group of hedgehogs toward their camp. Upon arrival, they found tanukis, 2 foxes, and 3 deer gathered together. It seemed Fenrir had also made some new recruits. Fenrir, it looks like you got some new allies, Izuku remarked. The wolf man nodded. Yes, my liege. The translation ability you taught me helped me recruit a few, but it seems you have gathered many more. Yes, I had great luck. I want you to meet Ogong, the Monkey King. Fenrir's eyes widened in surprise. A monkey? That's amazing. Monkeys are incredibly powerful, and only a few remain. Ogong nodded, aware of the strength his kin once held. Even if my descendants are weaker now, their potential could still grow. I believe it's time to increase our fighting strength. Could you introduce me to those you've brought? Izuku asked. Yes, my liege. The foxes stepped forward first. I am Q, and this is my little brother Kilo. The rest of our skulk were too scared to fight, but we had the strength to join you, Q explained. The smaller fox nodded shyly. Yeah. Next, the deer stepped forward. I am STO, and this is my mate, Amy. The small one behind us is our son, Junior. We are tired of being hunted and will join you, even if it means teaming up with wolves. Izuku nodded, then called, Ogong, Kaku, Nikki, Q, come here. The 5 stepped forward as he prepared to grant them new names and powers. He extended his fingers, channeling his energy carefully to avoid exhaustion. As he injected his blood into each of them, he shared his knowledge of the Japanese language, enhancing their abilities. Ogong remained unchanged, while Kaku grew to the size of a wolf, adorned with tattoos. Nikki transformed into a vibrant blue, Q grew 2 additional tails, and STO's horns darkened and expanded. Now for your new names, Izuku announced. Ogong, you shall be called Sun Wukong. Kaku, you are now Shikaku. Nikki, you are Sonic. Q, your new name is Kurama, and STO, you shall be called Last. They all glowed with newfound energy, ready to embrace their destinies. It had taken 5 days for the naming process to complete, and while Wukong remained unchanged, everyone else had gained a humanoid form. Kaku had transformed into a 5-foot man with sandy blonde hair and a lithe frame. He wore a simple long-sleeved red shirt and gray trousers, and he had crafted a gourd to carry a large amount of sand with him at all times. Sonic had grown to 3 feet 3 inches but had not fully turned into a human. Instead, he had gained some features like hands and feet, becoming bipedal. He wore white gloves and red shoes. Kurama had grown into a tall 6-foot man with bright red hair that cascaded down to his mid-back. He was dressed in a dark red kimono and sandals. Lastly, Last had reached 7 feet tall, sporting red hair and small black horns protruding from his head, but he retained his hooves instead of gaining feet. After the 5 leaders of their species had transformed, they provided blood to the rest of their kin, and Izuku proceeded to name them. The other fox was named Miles Prower. 8 hedgehogs were named Aoimaru, Midorimaru, Akamaru, Murosakimaru, Kiramaru, Torkoashimaru, and Shiramaru. Last's wife was named Amaya. The naming process took 2 weeks, during which everyone began training. Surprisingly, Izuku's plan worked, and everyone learned to speak Japanese. He used his connection with Fenrir to share the knowledge of the language with him and the other wolves. During this time, Izuku studied everything he could to gain knowledge for the conquest of Bonin Island and to enhance his own abilities. Each creature had an instinctive understanding of their powers, and he learned to manipulate his energy like they could, as his was the original energy. Through this, he discovered that no creature's energy was as adaptable as his own. While they could perform some tricks, like translating animal speech, Fenrir couldn't use his energy to produce fire. It remained eternally cold. He did create an attack while attempting to generate fire, but it was nothing close to actual flames. By the time September 1st arrived, Izuku decided they were ready to attack the deer. He was uncertain how long the conquest would take, days, weeks, or even months, but he was certain of one thing: he would win. After a month of training, all forces had become accustomed to their human forms and new powers. Future historians would record September 1st as the beginning of the Great Makai War, which would last for a grueling 11 years. The 10-year-old Morning Star stood at the border between the neutral zone and the deer territory, dressed in his military uniform. From the outside, it appeared to be a normal business suit, with a black jacket and trousers paired with a red shirt. However, it was no ordinary clothing. At Wukong's suggestion, he had learned to use his energy to create clothes, as transformed animals only gained one set of clothing. While it could be easily cleaned with his demonic energy, having different outfits was more practical. He had kept himself clean by using nearby lakes and destroying all dirt and bacteria with his energy. This allowed him to create a combat uniform that was specifically designed for mobility and durability. His force consisted of 64 animals, facing a daunting force of 495 deer. Shikaku had learned a useful ability. He could create an eye out of sand, allowing him to see miles away with little effort. This ability helped gauge the size of the enemy's fighting force. The odds were 7-1, and his troops had only a month of training, but the forces in the southern region were growing nervous due to recent failed attacks. He knew he had to act quickly to gain more territory and convert the enemy forces. They first set up camp along the border to establish a retreat point. As they approached a small area devoid of trees, they discovered 70 deer of varying shapes and sizes waiting for them. Izuku sat atop a transformed Fenrir, contemplating their next move. He recalled a battle plan he had devised with Fenrir and called out to his soldiers, "Demons, today we fight. This is our first step to take down those who have oppressed, hunted, and scorned us. We shall seize the entire island and bring it under my rule. Now, enter into Formation A." Following their leader's orders, the troops fell into position. 10 men with spiky brown hair stepped forward, forming 2 groups of 5. They were the few hedgehogs who had fully transformed into humans rather than remaining in their humanoid forms. Large spikes began to grow from their arms, creating a formidable wall of spikes facing the enemy. The rest of the troops formed behind them, each group of 5 supported by 22 soldiers, with 6 leaders standing at the rear. "Charge!" Izuku commanded, and the troops surged forward, meeting a line of deer halfway. The clash of antlers against the wall of spikes created a stalemate until more deer appeared, larger and more imposing, with gray beards. With a cry of "Wire deer!" they glowed blue, lifting the hedgehogs at the front into the air and slamming them down. The surrounding allies had to leap back to avoid being impaled. However, the 7 Chaos Hedgehogs, Oimaru, Midorimaru, Akamaru, Murosakimaru, Kiramaru, Torkoashimaru, and Shiramaru, reacted swiftly, unleashing energy beams in their respective colors: blue, green, red, purple, yellow, turquoise, and white. The beams struck several wire deer, sending them flying back. To further their position, 4 tanukis charged forward, growing in size and transforming into giant tanukis. Unfortunately, this proved to be a grave mistake as 20 deer, led by a golden deer, charged at them. The normal deer grew to an enormous size, nearly matching the giants, and aimed to impale them. Sand rose to block the antlers, but it was quickly destroyed as the golden deer's antlers glowed bright yellow, summoning lightning from the sky. The lightning turned the sand to glass, frying the giant tanukis and allowing the deer to impale them. As they fell, antlers burst from their bodies, causing blood to spill across the battlefield. "No!" cried Izuku and Shikaku, feeling their connection to the tanukis severed. But then they noticed one tanuki still alive. The boy, with brown hair and green eyes, looked to be about 15 years old. Wrapped in sand, he was quickly transported to Izuku and Shikaku for healing. Before Izuku could begin, he heard the boy muttering, "Fight. Fight. Fight. Keep on fighting, kill those BSTRDS, bring freedom." Just before fading into unconsciousness, Izuku placed his hand over him, sending a small amount of energy to keep him alive and kickstart his regeneration. The boy began to steam as his injuries healed, though the extent of the damage meant he would be out for a while. Izuku scowled, determined to take down the golden deer to prevent further casualties. "Last, take it down," he commanded. The deer man smirked as he stepped forward. Dressed in a yellow and white suit reminiscent of the early 1900s, he clutched a cane adorned with a treble clef at the top. As he approached the front line, the light around him seemed to come alive, forming tendrils that darted toward the golden deer. However, the deer dodged effortlessly in a golden blur. Anticipating a lightning attack, Last strummed his cane like a guitar, creating a riff that vibrated through the air. When the lightning struck, it scattered around him, forming a protective shield. "Foolish deer," Last declared, "this cane allows me to manipulate air pressure through my music. I can increase the pressure of the air around me, making the lightning take the path of least resistance." Thunderclouds gathered above him, and as they blasted him with lightning, he played a riff that blocked the attack. "Now, I believe it's time to end your life." Last charged at the golden deer, but was met by a wall of antlers. He struggled to break through, but they kept regenerating. Frustrated, he aimed his head at the antlers, causing his own to grow rapidly and wrap around them. With a grunt of effort, he lifted all 20 deer into the air before stabbing into their eyes. As the antlers shrank, Last's extended around the deer, and he used their bodies as projectiles, throwing them at the golden deer. Distracted by the corpses of its fallen comrades, the golden deer could not evade Last's attack. Last struck its face with his cane, releasing a powerful riff. The deer attempted to flee, but was met with a solid wall of air. "You're trapped now. Any last words?" Last taunted. The deer exclaimed, "Glory to the Nara clan." As the sky darkened, thunderclouds thickened above, casting an ominous shadow over the battlefield. Lightning arced across the clouds, pooling in the sky until it formed a dragon. Last's eyes widened at the sight, sensing the impending danger. Before the attack could begin, he shrank the barrier around him and lifted the golden deer above his head. Using his light tendrils, he played a riff as the barrier vanished, and he concentrated on increasing the density above him. "You're a fool. You think you can survive this? Now kill him, Kirin." The lightning dragon descended from the sky, faster than anyone could react. It struck Last with tremendous force, blasting through his barriers with ease. The initial strike hit the golden deer, then Last himself. He screamed in agony as the lightning continued to rain down for 5 long minutes, leaving him and the deer charred and barely recognizable. As the storm subsided, Last collapsed to the ground, but Izuku noticed him slowly regenerating. The static electricity in the area began to gather around the golden deer, which also started to recover. Icy chains emerged from Izuku's palm, wrapping around both Last and the deer, pulling them closer. The deer was too powerful to leave as an enemy, but Izuku decided to deal with it later. He sent enough energy to Last to speed up his recovery, hoping he would regain strength soon. Suddenly, Izuku felt a psychic energy wrap around him, holding him in place. He looked ahead to see 18 smaller deer, resembling wire deer but brown, straining as they chanted, "Stantler." Annoyed by their persistence and the loss of his subjects, he broke through the restraining energy and extended his hand. "Die, you pathetic creatures," he shouted, unleashing a blast of fire. All but the largest Stantler fell, the remaining one surviving due to its size. As Izuku gazed at the sky, he noticed the sun beginning to set. He realized that depending on the abilities of the remaining deer, the battle could extend into the next day. Just then, 20 green deer with glowing emerald eyes appeared, and a hurricane descended from the heavens. "Great," he muttered. No one under his command had the ability to combat a hurricane, not even a tornado. "All forces, fall back. Get as far away as you can. I'll hold it off as long as I can. Once it ends, charge in." The rest of his forces began to retreat, except for 8, Sonic and the 7 Chaos Hedgehogs. "Looks like you could use some help, boss," Sonic said. "Sonic, you don't have the abilities to stop a hurricane, and those who do aren't strong enough to help with one of that magnitude," Izuku replied. Sonic shook his head, waving his gloved finger. "That's where you're wrong, bossman. Me and the Chaos Hedgehogs have come up with a little technique that could help." He jumped into the air, absorbing energy from each beam, which kept him aloft. The 7 hedgehogs transformed into gems as the beams intensified before disappearing. "Chaos control!" Sonic shouted, enveloped in a golden light. When it faded, he looked different. His hair spiked up and turned a brilliant gold. Wukong, watching from a distance, widened his eyes in disbelief. "This is the power of all 8 of us combined. I'm sure we can be of some assistance," Sonic declared. Izuku nodded, feeling his own form begin to change. He grew older, his wings, tail, and horns expanding, claws emerging as he took to the air. "Be careful with your attacks. We can't risk making it more dangerous by adding fire or shrapnel," he warned. As the hurricane approached, Izuku could barely see the opposing deer. The winds whipped around him, and he focused, his eyes glowing crimson. He unleashed an energy blast at the hurricane, halting it momentarily before it resumed its advance. A golden ring caught his eye. It was Sonic, moving faster than sound, trying to counter the hurricane's spin. The storm slowed slightly, but not enough. Izuku felt grateful for the clouds overhead, which darkened the sky. Channeling all his energy, Izuku raised his tail and unleashed a barrage of energy blasts. His hands moved forward, beams spiraling together before striking the hurricane, halting its forward momentum. Izuku was thankful for his training, which allowed him to use his energy efficiently. He had stockpiled energy for a week leading up to this battle, knowing he would need it. He never imagined he would face an entire hurricane. 4 hours, Izuku and Sonic maintained their offensive against the storm. However, not everyone could keep going. The golden lights surrounding the hurricane faded as Sonic slingshot around it, crashing through Wukong and causing chaos. Izuku grunted, feeling the strain of their efforts. Izuku watched as the herd of deer began to falter, their strength waning under the pressure. Normally, they wouldn't have lasted this long, but with 20 of them, the energy drain was distributed, preventing it from overwhelming a single individual. However, his grin faded when he noticed the wire deer channeling energy toward the wind deer. "Oh no," he muttered, increasing his power output to compensate for the absence of sonic energy. He managed to hold on for another 2 hours, but soon felt his energy reserves dwindling. Even with the moon rising, his energy consumption was slightly outpacing his regeneration, and he was running on empty. "Those deer are relentless," Izuku growled, frustration mounting. He couldn't allow the wind to run rampant. He had already lost some of his forces and couldn't afford to lose any more. Eventually, his energy hit rock bottom, and his features began to shrink back to his original form. Seizing the opportunity, the deer unleashed tendrils of wind from the hurricane, striking Izuku and sending him crashing into the forest. Just before he collided with a tree, he was caught by a cascade of sand, which gently lowered him to the ground, where Fenrir awaited. "Thank you," Izuku said, standing up but stumbling slightly as exhaustion caught up with him. While direct energy manipulation was less taxing than converting energy into fire or ice, using it for an extended PRD was still draining. "We need to come up with a plan. Any ideas?" He breathed, taking deep breaths as he felt his energy slowly replenishing. His energy regeneration was something he had trained hard to improve. Although it took effort to store more energy than usual, it was easier to refill his capacity than to exceed it, especially on a full moon. However, he knew he wouldn't be as strong as when he had that excess energy. Then Last stepped forward with a manic grin, having recovered during the time Izuku had bought for them. "With your assistance, my lord, we can deal with that hurricane once and for all." Suddenly, a bloody Sonic appeared beside him. "I believe the hedgehogs could help as well," Last continued. Izuku raised an eyebrow, noticing Sonic's unusual attire. "Are you aware that you're wearing Wukong's intestines as a scarf?" he asked. Sonic looked down, surprised. "Oh yeah, it does look pretty neat, doesn't it? Do you think I could pull off wearing a scarf, boss?" Izuku didn't have time for this. "What do you mean you can help? You just crashed into the ground at high speed." "That's where you're wrong, bossman. The ability I gained thanks to you lets me ignore damage from high-speed collisions. Sure, crashes and punches still hurt, but it's pretty neat. Also, chaos control is different. The chaos hedgehogs give me their energy and then go into a comatose state until they recover, which takes a few hours. I could have kept going if I hadn't used that form today. Anyway, we could have the chaos hedgehogs help Last go super, and if you grant him some of your energy, we could pull off an incredible attack." Izuku nodded. "That sounds promising. I only have about a quarter of my energy back, so I hope it's enough." Everyone took their positions as Last gripped his cane tightly. The chaos hedgehogs circled around him, entering his body as emeralds, and he began to glow. "I can feel it. This power. I feel like I could do anything," Last exclaimed, exhilaration coursing through him. However, that feeling was tempered when he sensed Izuku's hand on his back, connecting him to the boy's energy reserves. The deer's eyes widened as he felt like he was swimming in an ocean of power, making his own feel insignificant by comparison. This was only a fraction of Izuku's strength, and he couldn't fathom how much power the boy possessed. The sensation lasted only a moment before he felt that ocean of energy merging with his own, amplifying it to extraordinary levels. "Hey you deer, you're going down," Last shouted, channeling his power into his staff, which transformed into a giant electric guitar. As he gripped it, tendrils of light played it, and he began to spin before unleashing an arc of energy. The energy spiraled, forming a tornado that clashed with the hurricane created by the deer. However, the final 4 deer stepped forward, unleashing streams of blue flames that ignited the energy hurricane, pushing back against Last's attack. "Fenrir, we need firepower. Show them why you're my right hand," Izuku shouted. Fenrir grinned, his palms glowing blue as icy snowflakes surrounded him. "Shredding frost," he called out, unleashing countless razor-sharp shards of ice toward the hurricane. The ice met the flames, creating a spectacular display of steam as the two forces battled it out. Izuku racked his brain for a solution, and inspiration struck when he noticed the body of the golden deer next to Wukong. "Wukong, this may hurt, but bear with me," Izuku said, placing his hand on Wukong's back. The monkey nodded as Izuku drained as much energy from him as he could. Fortunately, Wukong's immortality allowed for rapid energy regeneration, but his reserves were still far smaller than Izuku's. After gathering enough energy, about a fifth of Wukong's normal reserves, Izuku placed his hand on the golden deer. Energy surged through it, arcing like electricity as he sought to understand its abilities. Though he couldn't fully grasp how it worked in the limited time he had, he felt he had enough to proceed. Izuku preferred to learn how to use his energy in different forms rather than relying on this method, which felt like cheating. He believed that mastering his abilities would lead to a better understanding of his power, rather than just copying others. Even though his energy compensated for the difference, he knew the true potential of the abilities would only be realized with full mastery. With the remaining energy, his eyes glowed red as a crimson bolt of electricity formed in his hand. He launched it like a javelin, and it arced across the sky before crashing into last hurricane. The lightning mixed with the raging winds, causing the storm to become increasingly unstable until it collapsed in on itself, resulting in a massive explosion of wind, fire, lightning, water, and shards of ice. Izuku's hesitation to use anything other than pure energy became evident as the chaotic attacks began to turn against them. Exhausted and out of energy, Izuku panicked, acting on instinct. "Take cover," he shouted. Many complied, with Wukong shielding some and Fenrir creating a wall of ice for others. However, Last, having exhausted all his energy in the hurricane, was unable to move. Izuku pushed him down and shielded him with his own body. Ice shards pierced Izuku, water needles struck him, and fire burned his skin. Lightning surged back at him, spreading through his chest but dissipating just before it reached Last. Blood leaked from the wounds on Izuku's body as he coughed. You okay, Last?" The deer man nodded, staring up at his lord, who, despite his young age, he had thought infallible. In the training leading up to the battle, Izuku had demonstrated immense power, and Last had believed him invincible. Now, as Izuku's blood covered his face, one thought consumed him. He can bleed. Last's mind raced. The fact that Izuku had sacrificed himself for him barely registered. It was the blood on him that shocked him most. Izuku, their leader, could be wounded to this extent. Though he had been hurt in spars before, his rapid growth made it difficult to injure him severely, and never to this degree. Last kept repeating in his mind, "He can bleed, he can hurt, he can die," until he was jolted back to reality when Izuku collapsed. Fortunately, he was caught by Sun Wukong. When Wukong spoke, he drew everyone's attention. "We're withdrawing. Luckily, no one died in that explosion, but we have injuries, and our leader is down. The deer have suffered as well, so we'll withdraw and come back later." Some hesitated to follow Wukong's orders, but when Fenrir backed him, they all agreed. These two were the hands of the king when Izuku was indisposed. All forces retreated back to their camps on either side of the border between deer and demon territory. Last's son watched as everyone returned, wriggling out of his mother's embrace to congratulate them on their victory. However, the sight of injuries and the dark look on his father's face filled him with dread. What horrified him most was Izuku, someone he had come to admire in the months leading up to the battle, now in critical condition. He tried to rush to him, but Fenrir stopped him. "Let me go, Fenny. I need to see him," the boy pleaded. Fenrir shook his head. "The Lord isn't in a state to see anyone right now. He's in critical condition, so we need to get him into his tent and let him rest." The boy nodded solemnly, allowing them to pass. Izuku's tent was different from the others. It was larger and, at the request of his subjects, designed to be pitch black, as if no light could enter. Wukong, who could see best in complete darkness, carefully set Izuku down and began to look after him. Though everyone had night vision, they still needed some light, but Wukong, like Izuku, did not. Surrounded by darkness, Izuku's wounds began to heal. Incapacitated as he was, he couldn't speed up his energy regeneration as he had done earlier, so he was slowly recovering and using that energy to mend his injuries. A curious little red eye attempted to peek in but was quickly dragged away. As time passed and the sun set, Izuku stepped outside his tent, having fully recovered. He might not have had all his energy back, but he was ready. His demons were in top form, except for Eren, who still lay unconscious. Glancing over, Izuku noticed the restrained deer. They had captured the golden deer, the giant stantler, and a few others. All that remained were the 7 white deer, 20 wind manipulation deer, and 4 fire deer. With a plan forming in his mind, Izuku gathered his troops, leaving last's son and wife behind. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the child with red cheeks and tears in his eyes. He walked over and ruffled the boy's hair, careful to avoid his antlers. "It'll be all right, little guy. We'll be back before the moon is in the sky. I won't take them lightly this time." Not seeing the fearful look on the boy's face, Izuku turned and led his demons to confront their current opponents. The 4 flaming deer appeared to be in perfect condition, but one of them was clearly a child, which angered him further. They may have been animals, but how could they send a child to face him? The white deer and wind deer looked worse for wear, with fewer numbers than before. Izuku noted the bandages wrapped around them, more like leaves functioning as bandages. It was intriguing that they had some form of medicine. This warranted further investigation. "I think it's time to show these Cervidae what we're made of, don't you?" he declared, met with cheers as everyone prepared to charge. But Izuku raised his hand. "It shall just be me and the clan heads in this assault." Fenrir, Wukong, Last, Sonic, Kurama, and Shikaku stepped forward. Izuku let out a wicked laugh, raising his hand to his eye and lifting his hair to reveal his blood-red eyes. "Let's show them what we've got." He bolted forward, leading the charge, only to be met with blasts of fire. Undeterred, he continued running as a wolf made of ice leaped overhead, unleashing a frosty ray that collided with the flames, creating a cloud of steam and freezing the ground beneath them. Izuku spun on the ice, building momentum as red lightning crackled around him. He then threw it, calling out, "Kuranos!" As the steam cleared, a fire deer lay defeated, its comrades staring in horror before their expressions twisted into anger. The wind picked up, but it was noticeably weaker than before. They clearly lacked the strength for another hurricane. Izuku smirked, enjoying the thrill of battle. This was much more exciting than commanding from the back, but he knew his troops needed experience, so he couldn't dominate the battlefield every time. To his left, a giant staff extended, defying the raging winds, and slammed into a white deer, leaving a gruesome mess against a nearby tree. Izuku held out his hand and caught a spinning blue sphere, launching it with all his strength. The sphere collided with a wind deer, resulting in a chaotic scene as Sonic bounced off a tree, causing another deer to meet a similar fate. The elemental deer banded together, unleashing a torrent of fire fueled by wind. Izuku executed a backflip, narrowly avoiding the flames as a wave of sand surged forward, colliding with the fire and transforming into glass just inches from their faces. Up close, Izuku delivered a powerful punch to the skull of a white deer, grabbing another and hurling it into a tree behind his soldiers. The deer lay unconscious, barely surviving the encounter. With the remaining deer in sight, Izuku raised his hands, releasing a brilliant burst of light that blinded them. Last appeared behind the wind deer, swiftly incapacitating several with his axe cane, while orange energy tendrils ensnared the fire deer's necks. The younger deer struggled to escape, but the energy drained their flames, leaving them weak and barely alive. Standing before the last 7 deer, Izuku declared, "I'll give you one more chance. Bow to me, and I may spare your lives." Recognizing his power, the deer lowered themselves in SBMson. "Good," he replied as sand erupted from the ground, forming cocoons around them and dragging them back to his camp. "I must thank you. You've revealed a weakness I wasn't aware of. I may be strong, but a combined attack can still bring me down. I will work to correct this." Izuku instructed Shikaku to keep the living deer wrapped in sand until he emerged from his tent. After ordering his soldiers to rest and recuperate, he entered his tent, gathering energy for the task ahead. When midday arrived, he stepped out and rallied his troops. "Soldiers, we have won a glorious victory, but this is just a fraction of their total forces. We have lost some of our own. Do not let this sadden you. Let it fuel your rage as we conquer this land. Now, it's time for these deer to pay reparations for our fallen comrades. Last, come to me." Last approached with a manic smile, and together they faced the 15 deer before them. Izuku had Fenrir create a large bowl of ice, while Last filled it with his blood. "Now drink," Izuku commanded, as 14 tanukis dunked the deer's heads into the bowl, releasing them only. When it was empty, he turned to the one deer who had not been dunked, a golden deer that had just awakened. You better not spill a drop. The deer attempted to resist, but Izuku had Fenrir and Wukong hold its mouth open as he made a cut on his wrist, allowing his blood to flow into the deer's mouth. This continued until he was satisfied. You shall be reborn anew, no longer serving those you once did. You will now serve me as Serenian. The golden deer transformed, enveloped in a golden glow, until a tall woman with blonde hair and yellow eyes stood before him, dressed in an amber toga with golden antlers. Interesting, Izuku remarked. I expected you to be male. No, my lord, she replied. I was the only female of my kind to grow antlers. Once I proved my strength, they allowed me to lead. Izuku's brow furrowed. So that hurricane was your idea? Indeed, my lord. It was a last resort against a superior opponent. There are 100 wind manipulators, and I was granted only 20 to lead against you, which is why it was weaker than it could have been. That revelation rattled Izuku. If true, the attack could have been 4 times stronger. He turned to Last, who was overseeing the transformation of the other deer. Junior stood by his side, watching as they drank the blood. Don't waste a single drop, you pathetic whelps, Last commanded, instilling fear in them. Despite being herbivores, they drank eagerly. Once finished, the deer began to shine, their biology shifting as their fur turned gray and their teeth sharpened into fangs. Izuku approached each deer, carefully naming them while maintaining control over his energy. After a few minutes, he reached the last one, a small calf. Anger surged within him. Sending a child to the front lines was unacceptable. The calf snarled at him, torn between hatred and reverence, reflecting the conflict within them as the new blood coursed through their veins. Izuku gazed at the newly transformed calf, now named Rosie. As she glowed and revealed her human form, he noticed her striking features: white hair, pitch-black eyes, and pale gray skin. She wore a appealing black and red Lolita dress, complemented by a sun hat. With a smile, Izuku addressed the group around him. Who do you all serve? In unison, they replied, We serve you, my lord. He nodded, pleased with their loyalty. Now, get settled. We'll rest for a week before our campaign. Junior, come here. Junior stepped away from his mother, Amaya, and approached Izuku. Junior, I would like you to meet Rosie. She's around your age, and I'd like you to help her adjust to her new surroundings and the knowledge she now possesses. Shyly, Junior extended his hand to Rosie. My name is Junior. It's nice to meet you. Rosie took his hand and stood up, stuttering slightly as she adapted to her new language and customs. Greetings, she managed to say, before curtsying as her mind instructed her. My name is Rosie. It's a pleasure to meet you. She smiled brightly, revealing her fangs. Junior smiled back, taking her hand. Come on, I'll show you to your tent. He paused, unsure which tent was designated for Rosie. Izuku chuckled and pointed. It's the one next to yours, Junior. The boy nodded and led Rosie along. The following week was dedicated to helping the new deer acclimate to their powers and the dynamics of their group. Most of the integration was successful, though one tanuki named Aaron harbored strong resentment toward the deer and other non-demons. Izuku worked to temper Aaron's hostility enough to prevent any serious conflict. As Izuku continued his campaign into deer territory, he faced numerous opponents. In one significant battle, his forces, consisting of 70 demons, 8 wolves, 27 tanuki, 12 deer, 20 hedgehogs, and 2 foxes, clashed with 90 deer. Not wanting to expose children to the battlefield, he left Junior and Rosie with Amaya. The battle lasted 3 days, resulting in the capture of 20 deer, but at a cost. 2 tanuki and 1 hedgehog lost their lives. This pattern continued for 2 months: battle, mourn the fallen, indoctrinate the captured, and place them under Last's command. The war with the deer was nearing its conclusion, having seen 5 battles thus far. The numbers had escalated from 7 to 150 deer in the last confrontation. On November 11th, the penultimate battle approached, promising to be different from the previous ones. Instead of direct confrontations, this would be a siege. Izuku and his forces stood outside the first base established by the deer. He marveled at the size of the base, capable of housing 200, and wondered how they managed to construct it without hands, attributing it to their quirks. Another intriguing aspect was the advanced medical knowledge the deer possessed, which he learned from the captured. They had a blue-nosed deer capable of transformation, bringing with it an innate understanding of medicine that improved with age. Izuku chuckled at the name given to this deer, Cotton, and resolved to rename it once it fell under his control. Izuku's forces had grown significantly since he began. He now commanded the 6 heads of the clans: Fenrir, Wukong, Shikaku, Sonic, Kurama, and last, along with their subordinates, 7 wolves, 14 tanuki, 10 hedgehogs, 1 fox, and 70 deer. With the increase in deer, Serenian was appointed as last second in command, much to his annoyance. Standing before the forest of antlers, which served as a barrier to the base, Izuku noted the unusual metallic sheen of the antlers, a stark contrast to the typical white or brown. In the midst of a fierce battle, Izuku and his allies faced a formidable barrier surrounding the deer base, seemingly impervious to their attacks. The deer woman, Siri, stood ready, her hands raised to the sky. With a determined shout, she summoned a bolt of lightning that struck the metal horns of the barrier, but it absorbed the energy without a scratch. Frustrated, she concentrated, channeling lightning between her hands and releasing it in a powerful beam, only to see it dissipate upon impact. "My lord, it seems impossible to penetrate it with lightning," she reported, concern etched on her face. Izuku pondered their options. The wind technique was too dangerous, risking casualties on both sides. This barrier had become a source of immense frustration for him over the weeks of siege. They had begun their assault on November 11th, and now it was the 29th. Despite his powers, he had been unable to break through, and the barrier only seemed to grow stronger and more adaptive. Izuku had witnessed the barrier evolve from a simple circle around the base to a dome that thwarted aerial attacks and extended underground. Each attempt to breach it resulted in diminishing returns, leaving him at his wits' end. He had even unleashed a hurricane, but the barrier held firm against the storm's might. Inside the war tent, Izuku paced anxiously, exhaustion evident in his eyes. "Does anyone have any ideas on how to break through that barrier?" he asked, but silence filled the room. Everyone was weary from the relentless siege. Suddenly, Wukong's eyes lit up as he recalled the words of an old friend. The memory reminded him that brute force wasn't always the answer. Sometimes, strategy was key. "What we need isn't brute force," Wukong said, stepping forward. "We can't break through their defense, but we can draw them out. If we keep attacking, they won't fall for a feigned retreat. We need to make them lower the barrier themselves." Izuku nodded, intrigued. "What do you suggest?" Wukong began to pace the room. "We need to use your poisonous ability from the wolves you fought in the past. Let's see how they fare against that." With a determined smirk, Izuku agreed. "Sounds like a plan." He approached the barrier, arms outstretched. His left arm glowed purple while flames erupted from his right. He brought his hands together and released a burst of purple flames. Fire had proven ineffective, but poison was a new approach. As the flames spread, the metal began to corrode, and while it slowly regenerated, the smoke began to fill the dome. Izuku heard screams from within the barrier, but they quickly faded. He knew they were still alive. Their medic was doing a commendable job. An idea sparked in his mind, and he grinned mischievously. "Let's see that medic try to stop asphyxiation. Shikaku, surround the dome with sand now." Following his command, Shikaku encased the barrier in sand, which Izuku quickly transformed into glass. "If this doesn't draw them out, nothing will." He placed his hands on the glass, unleashing a continuous burst of violet fire. Smoke filled the dome as he pumped in more flames. The strategy worked. The antler barrier finally dropped, revealing a giant creature in its place. Confusion swept through the ranks as many thought they were facing a tanuki. The surprise was short-lived as the monster began to pound on the glass, eventually shattering it and allowing oxygen to rush in. The creature let out a deafening roar before charging away. Izuku, however, was not about to let them regroup. His eyes glowed a brilliant blue as he formed a katana made of ice, unleashing his energy to create a massive snowflake beneath the encampment. The blue energy enveloped all living beings, forming a barrier that wrapped around them, ready for the next phase of their battle. Izuku held his ice sword high and muttered a single phrase, "Bleak December." With a swift motion, he slashed downward, unleashing a wave of energy that struck the monster and the surrounding deer, freezing them in place. Blades of ice formed, slicing through their flesh while leaving the ice itself untouched. As Izuku's sword transformed into a giant scythe, he aimed it at the camp, causing an explosion of ice shards to erupt from the center, eliminating all within and severing one of the monster's antlers. The creature shrank down until only a small blue-nosed reindeer remained. Izuku picked it up by its broken antler, concern etched on his face. "I hope you're the medic. Everybody, grab the corpses and bring them back to base. We'll eat well tonight." He turned and walked away, still clutching the small reindeer, unaware of Last's disapproving gaze. Such a waste of good deer, they could have been useful. Upon returning to base, Izuku wasted no time and injected his blood into the reindeer, initiating a transformation into a small bipedal creature. Just as it began to wake, Izuku glared at it, using his energy to freeze it in place. "You serve under me now, got that?" The tiny reindeer nodded quickly as it was placed on the ground. "Serenian will look after you for now and help you acclimate. All right, you need a name." He glanced at the horn he had removed. "Your name is now Chopper." The little reindeer nodded vigorously until a random woman picked him up, causing him to panic. "Eha, help me, my lord. I'm being kidnapped." Izuku shook his head. "Make sure he acclimates quickly, Serenian. See if you can find out if he's the doctor or not." Serenian gently stroked Chopper's head. "Your wish is my command, my lord," and took the tiny reindeer to join the others under Last's command. Izuku smirked as he looked behind him at Wukong and Fenrir. "Just one more battle and we'll have conquered the deer. Are you two ready?" Fenrir knelt down and replied, "Yes, my lord," while Wukong flashed a cheeky grin and gave a thumbs up. "You bet, boss." Izuku nodded in approval. "Good." As the preparations for the final battle began, Izuku gathered with Chopper, Fenrir, and Wukong in the war tent. The little reindeer boy trembled in his seat, overwhelmed by the intimidating aura of the three. Chopper was wrapped in leafy bandages he had fashioned for himself to aid with his injuries. Izuku studied him closely, noticing the bandages. Misinterpreting the look, Chopper began to bow. "Please don't eat me, lord. I beg of you, please don't eat me." Izuku sighed, realizing this would be a recurring theme with Chopper. "Get up," he commanded. Confused, Chopper looked at him. "I said get up. Don't make me repeat myself." In a panic, Chopper quickly returned to his seat. Izuku couldn't believe this was the same creature that had once fought him. "I'm not going to eat you. What I want is your skills. Tell me, how are your medical skills?" Chopper looked down, his voice trembling. "They're not the best. They're nothing compared to the doctor I served. I was just her apprentice." Tears welled in his eyes. "And now she's dead." Izuku face-bombed, realizing he had inadvertently eliminated the best doctor among the deer, but he knew having Chopper would be better than nothing. Determined to see Chopper's skills firsthand, Izuku took him to the medical tent. While minor injuries healed quickly, more severe ones took time, and they lacked medicinal technology. However, Izuku was pleasantly surprised by Chopper's performance. Once in doctor mode, Chopper was unstoppable, setting bones and rapidly creating leafy bandages and splints. He even had the courage to scold Cerberus when he came in with a spike of wood through his paw. Izuku wondered just how skilled the original doctor had been. To enhance Chopper's abilities, Izuku visited the library, hopeful he might find something useful. His search paid off when he discovered a book titled Medicinal Memoirs by I.MSNTT.C. Flipping through the pages, he found advanced medicinal techniques, starting from simple concepts and progressing to complex methods. Grateful for the knowledge, Izuku decided to return to Chopper. When he arrived back at the tent, he found Chopper taking a break after treating all the prisoners. "Good job, Chopper. You can have this as a reward." Chopper looked puzzled, not expecting a book as a reward. When he saw the medicinal book, his eyes lit up with excitement. He was so captivated that he didn't notice the runes appearing on the back, which vanished too quickly for Izuku to examine. As Chopper opened the book, he was confused by its contents. Some pages were blank, while others contained different text, guiding the reader to conclusions rather than stating techniques outright. "Thank you, my lord. With this, I can learn so much more about medicine," Chopper exclaimed, his enthusiasm evident. Izuku nodded and walked away, focused on planning the final assault against the deer. Thoughts of the mysterious runes lingered in his mind, but he pushed them aside. He had a war to prepare for. The wind howled around him as thunder cracked in the sky. Izuku soared through the air, wings flapping, gazing down at the deer's stronghold. This battle would be different. There were only 50 deer, but they were not ordinary. They belonged to the Nara clan, Yaz of shadow manipulation. Izuku and Wukong had faced some of them before, but many more had gathered now, and the stormy weather favored the deer, providing ample shadows for their use. Instead of leading a large army, Izuku decided to go with an elite strike squad. He had recruited Fenrir, Wukong, Shikaku, and Siri, assigning each of them 10 opponents. Last was not pleased to be excluded, but he was busy training Junior, making good use of his time. Kurama and Sonic were also left behind. Sonic lacked defensive abilities, and while they couldn't register his speed, stepping into a shadow would spell disaster for him. Kurama, still discovering his true potential, had impressive regeneration and strength, but those skills didn't justify the risk of bringing him along. Izuku roared over the thunder, "Are you ready?" His 4 companions responded with battle cries as they charged toward the stronghold. As they approached, shadows retreated from the surrounding area. When they reached the stronghold, all 50 deer awaited them, ready for battle. Among them was a familiar figure, a deer with a face covered in burn scars. Izuku smirked at the deer, remarking, "Those burns suit you." This only fueled the deer's anger as each leader sized up their opponent. With a fierce shout, Izuku commanded, "Charge!" The deer responded with a rallying cry, "For Nara!" Both sides surged toward each other, but the deer acted first, summoning shadow deer to bolster their ranks. Izuku was the first to strike. "Chaos!" he shouted, and flaming chains wrapped around his arms as blades formed in his hands. He swung them wide, sending the chains flying and destroying the approaching shadow deer. The others faced their own challenges. Shikaku attempted to crush the shadow deer with sand, but they simply poofed into smoke and reformed further ahead. As they closed in, he encased himself in a protective dome of sand. Fenrir created an ice blade, slashing at the shadow deer. Despite his efforts, they kept reforming, and he found himself in a stalemate. When they got too close, he unleashed a burst of ice to push them back. Wukong, undeterred by injuries, swung his staff wildly, attacking the shadow deer with a manic smile. He fought his way toward the Nara deer, determined to take them down, but their bodies melted into shadows, retreating to join the clash with Izuku. Siri, wielding dual lightning bolts, was more successful. Each bolt she threw struck a shadow deer, causing them to vanish without reforming. When some got too close, she recalled the bolts with lightning speed, using them to cut down the remaining shadows around her. She advanced toward the real deer, swiftly decapitating them, but like Wukong's foes, they melted into shadows. Seeing her friends in trouble, Siri decided to assist Fenrir, dispatching the shadow deer surrounding him. "Looks like you could use some help," she said with a smirk. Fenrir grunted in agreement, explaining, "I don't know what you did, but my opponents keep reforming." He gestured to Wukong, who was still fighting fiercely. "And my regeneration isn't enough to keep up with that." Siri nodded, continuing to fend off the shadow deer. "It must be the light. My attacks are destroying the shadows, and your ice should do the same." Fenrir's eyes lit up with an idea. He created a new sword, resembling an icy prism. "Give me some light," he requested. Siri condensed her lightning and directed a beam of energy toward the sword, causing it to glow brilliantly. With a smirk, Fenrir charged at the shadow deer, slicing through them with his illuminated sword. To his relief, they did not reform. Siri and Fenrir pressed forward until they reached the Nara deer, who retreated into the shadows behind their clan head before they could be attacked. Meanwhile, Shikaku remained in his sand dome, watching as shadow deer rammed against it without success. The other 3 members of the strike force decided to press on, heading directly for the Nara deer. Wukong struck fiercely, while Fenrir delivered a decisive blow, and Siri unleashed a surge of lightning, causing their enemies to dissolve into shadows that drifted toward Izuku. With their creators defeated, the shadow deer dissipated into smoke. Izuku was in the thick of battle, wielding his chaos blades to fend off anyone who approached. He released the flaming swords, sending them flying toward the stronghold's wall. They missed the leader but struck the stone, the heavy rain preventing an inferno. Using the chains at his disposal, he launched himself toward the leader, aiming to kick the deer ensnared within them. However, the deer evaded his attack, transforming into shadows that enveloped Izuku, a shadowy deer head forming above him. "Do you think you can defeat me, the mighty Shikaku, Lord of the Shadows?" the deer taunted. Izuku smirked confidently. "You don't stand a chance." Just then he felt a crushing pressure as Shikaku attempted to overpower him. Izuku flexed defiantly, flames igniting around him before erupting into a roaring blaze. Shikaku dodged, leaping away and using his shadow form to slip through a crack in the ground for cover. From this vantage point, he unleashed a barrage of shadow spikes that erupted from the earth. Izuku managed to evade most, but one pierced him, forcing him to manipulate his energy to avoid critical damage. Blood trickled from his mouth as Shikaku reformed. "Not so cocky now?" Shikaku sneered. Izuku grinned, revealing his bloodied teeth. "Oh, I wouldn't say that." Despite his injuries, he raised his hand, his eyes crackling with red lightning, and slammed it down, summoning a bolt of lightning. It struck too quickly for Shikaku to react, but the deer was fortunate. Shadows wrapped around him, forming a protective cocoon. The shadows in the area writhed and expanded, and Izuku watched in confusion as his allies came to his aid. "I see you're all finished." "Good job," Siri remarked, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay, my lord?" Izuku nodded. "I'll be fine. For now, we need to break into that cocoon." Wukong boldly approached the cocoon and knocked on it. "Shouldn't be too hard to break through this thing." As he did, four shadows burst forth, piercing through Wukong's chest and sending him crashing to the ground. His head rolled toward Izuku as the shadows morphed into feline-like creatures. "Well, I didn't see that coming," Izuku muttered, rolling his eyes as he tossed Wukong's head back to his body, allowing him to regenerate. He then directed a burst of fire at the felines, but they remained unaffected. "Well, that's different." Siri unleashed a bolt of lightning, but it too had no effect. Fenrir charged in with his sword, only to have it bounce off one of the creatures, which retaliated by firing dart-like projectiles at him. Fortunately, sand enveloped him, providing a shield against the attacks. As Fenrir was pulled back by the sand, one of the shadows leaped into the air, spinning like a shuriken and launching itself at him. The regenerated Wukong was ready, blocking the attack with his staff. However, he was unprepared for a follow-up assault as a shadow emerged from the ground, engulfing him like a Venus flytrap and slamming him from side to side. Izuku and Siri intervened, sending bolts of lightning at the shadow, which released Wukong. What happened next left them bewildered. Instead of reforming, a glowing orb materialized. Without regard for his safety, Wukong began attacking the orb with all his might, but a fourth shadow extended itself and pierced through him. Despite this, Wukong's efforts were not in vain. When the orb reformed, it glowed red and once again swallowed him. This time, after the slamming, it exploded, leaving nothing behind. Izuku realized the creature's weakness. Hit it with ranged attacks until it shows its core. He backflipped to avoid another spear, standing atop the shadow as it appeared confused. Seizing the opportunity, he unleashed a flurry of lightning bolts, blasting it back and causing it to turn red. He continued to dodge its attacks until, eventually, it exploded. The other two shadows were dealt with swiftly. Wukong used his sand to crush one until its core was revealed, leading to its destruction, while Siri electrocuted the final one, and Fenrir delivered the finishing blow, encasing it in ice to prevent an explosion. Once the shadows were defeated, they approached to destroy the remaining cocoon, but it was too late. Cracks appeared, smoke billowed, and a roar echoed as a colossal creature emerged, illuminating the area. If darkness is the absence of light, then the reverse applied. This creature absorbed not just the shadows but all darkness, leaving only blinding light in its wake. The demons cried out in agony as Izuku felt his powers waning, reverting to his normal form. His horns shrank to stubs, his claws became mere diamonds on the backs of his hands, and his wings diminished. The others felt their strength wane as well, but Fenrir quickly fashioned glasses from ice to refract enough light for them to see. They gazed up at the massive shadowy form that resembled a deer, and Wukong exclaimed, "What do we even do against that thing?" It was then he noticed Izuku on the ground, his eyes unfocused and breathing heavily. "Izuku!" Wukong shouted, realizing his friend was in danger. He quickly grabbed Izuku and dodged as the giant antlers came crashing down. Izuku felt weak, more vulnerable than ever. Memories flooded back to a time when he had felt this powerless, and he couldn't shake the feeling that nothing ever changed. He was still weak. Izuku was snapped out of his daze by Wukong, who began shouting at him. "Izuku, focus. We need you right now, we can't have you zoning out." Wukong could feel through their bond that something was wrong with Izuku, but now wasn't the time to be gentle. "Thank you, Wukong," Izuku replied, quickly regaining his bearings. He looked at the beast before them, though it was difficult to see anything with all the lights surrounding them. The only thing he could clearly make out was the deer, which stood out in the darkness. Before he could think further, the deer charged at them. The demons evaded and attempted various attacks, but in their weakened state, they struggled to inflict any real damage. Fenrir could barely conjure ice, Siri could only produce weak light shocks, and Shikaku could only manipulate small amounts of sand. Wukong suddenly felt a tingling on his left bicep. He looked down and saw runes glowing there. When he touched them, much like his staff, a weapon materialized, a white sword reminiscent of those carried by ancient samurai. It looked flashy, but the blade was of top quality. "Boss?" he shouted, throwing the blade to Izuku before branding his own staff. Izuku turned just in time to catch the sword, and as he did, memories rushed into his mind. Though he couldn't make sense of them all, he recalled various sword forms. He rushed forward and swung the blade. It was sharp enough to cut through the deer, but it quickly regenerated. Izuku let out a frustrated sound and jumped back just as the deer attempted to stomp on him. "We need to land a fatal blow, or it'll just recover." He had no idea how to deliver such a blow until he saw the deer charging at Siri. Siri couldn't evade in time, and Izuku pushed her to safety, swinging the sword to cut through the deer's teeth and leaping into its mouth. "My lord boss," his companions cried out in shock. As the deer celebrated its apparent victory, it suddenly cried out in pain. Inside its body, Izuku was slashing at everything he could reach. He landed on a black bone and spotted what he was aiming for below him, a pulsating mass releasing dark energy. A smirk crossed Izuku's face as he felt his strength returning. There was no light in this place, which made him stronger. Using his night vision, he identified the weak points and jumped down. He channeled electricity through the blade and struck as hard as he could, releasing a surge of lightning that stopped the heart. To ensure it was enough, he began cutting through everything attached to it. The deer, poised to stomp on the demons, suddenly stopped and collapsed. A giant hole burst open from its chest, releasing darkness and restoring the world to normal. Izuku marched out, dragging the heart behind him, much to everyone's elation. They all knelt before him, and Fenrir spoke first. "Congratulations, my lord. You have successfully conquered the deer." Izuku smiled but shook his head. "Thank you, but this is only the beginning." He then turned to Wukong. "Where did you get this blade?" Fenrir shrugged. "I suddenly felt a burning on my bicep, and then the runes appeared. When I touched them, this sword popped out." Izuku examined the blade. "It's so white, so pure. It feels wrong for someone like me to wield a virtuous blade like this." He shook his head to dispel those thoughts and looked at Wukong. "Let me see your arm." Wukong approached and offered his arm. Izuku studied it but saw nothing unusual. However, he sensed a very familiar energy, demonic in nature. These runes. They feel so familiar. What's going on? He sat in front of the giant heart and began to meditate, wanting to store it like Wukong's weapons. Each time he had seen the runes, it was only for brief moments, never long enough to understand them fully. He let his energy guide him, placing his hand on the heart. The runes spread from his body, coating the heart. When he opened his eyes, he saw the kanji of the runes. The heart began to shrink until nothing remained. Izuku felt something on his chest and looked down to find the runes now emblazoned over his heart. He smiled. This warrants further attention, but for now, let's raid the stronghold. We now have a way to transfer more materials. The others nodded and followed Izuku. They gathered as much as they could, and Izuku sealed everything they stole. Eventually, they arrived at the final housing area, where they found a female deer lying dead, blood pooled around her. 2 unconscious pitch-black baby deer lay beside her. She must have died giving birth, Izuku realized, sensing something special about one of the calves. It had great potential. Siri, give the one on your left your blood. I'll give the one on the right mine. The 2 offered their blood to the calves, and Izuku declared, time for the names. The one on the left, in honor of besting Shikaku, I shall call him Shikamaru. And this one I shall call Jinwoo. Siri and Izuku picked up the 2 deer as they transformed into babies. Now let's get back. I do believe it's time to celebrate our victory. With smiles on their faces, they returned to the base to celebrate with the rest of the troops.